Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the Maelstrom and got Harem in Bleach? Part 3. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. They were running through a huge dark area that seemed to pulse with energy. Naruto was at the front, Yaruchi to his side, and everyone the rest were bringing up the rear. Ryu, next to Chad, shouted out, "Don't look now, but that section we just passed through is collapsing on us. I'm running as fast as I can, but I don't think we're gonna make it." Yaruchi responded without even turning her head. "Quit looking behind you and concentrate on running. If the restricted current swallows you up then it's all over." They continued to run full pelt. Something appeared out of the murk behind Ryu and grabbed him by the extra cloth on his outfit. Ichigo noticed first. "Ryu, I knew that stupid outfit of yours was going to get you caught." "Wait, Ichigo. The restrictive current entangles the spiritual body. If you reveal yourself using your Zanpakuto, it'll swallow you too." Ryu struggled against it before Chad grabbed him with one hand, tearing away the short cloak-like piece of cloth. "Thanks for that, Chad." The giant Mexican just grabbed Ryu and hauled him over his shoulder. "Come on." Ryu began to shout and complain about it, but was ignored as they ran. He saw something. "I don't mean to bother you while you're running, but something else is coming," he warned. A light appeared behind them, almost like an old ghost train in some corny movie. "Yaruchi, what is that?" "It's the cleaner. It comes through here every 7 days to clear out the passageway, and it's just our bad luck that today is the day. Don't look back at it, that will only slow you down. Just keep running or it will crush you to powder." Naruto nodded and kept running, all the while silently hoping that no one did something stupid. A light appeared ahead, getting closer and closer. "Go. Go. We're almost there," shouted Yaruchi as she began to speed up. The cleaner was getting closer. Ryu shouted, "We're not going to make it." Harem pivoted, activating her power. Naruto heard her shout some sort of incantation before a glowing transparent shield appeared before the cleaner. Then the world went white. The next thing Naruto knew, he was falling and the others were screaming. They landed with 6 faint thuds. Naruto couldn't see or hear anything, but by the feel of it, he was stuck headfirst in the ground. Someone tugged at his leg and he was pulled free to see he was being held upside down by Chad. "Thanks, Big Bad." Chad nodded and set him down. Naruto scooped up Yaruchi just in time to join Ichigo and Chad in stunned disgust as Ryu pulled out a spare cape. "Don't tell me he brought a change of clothes," Naruto deadpanned. "I'm alright with gay people, but if he comes on to me I'm gonna stab him." Ichigo nodded in assent, and the dark-skinned Mexican went a little pale. Naruto's comment days earlier about Ryu stalking Chad coming to the fore of his mind. Harem got up and dusted herself off, chipper as ever. "Isn't this great? Everyone's okay." Suddenly Yaruchi slammed into Harem's face, head-butting her eye. "It was not great, we were lucky," she said disdainfully. "My eye." Harem had tears of pain streaming down her face. Naruto lightly swatted Yaruchi on her backside. "Bad kitty," he joked. She hissed at him then calmed down. "I told you not to expose your spiritual powers in there. We were fortunate the cleaner only touched the shield area. If it had touched any part of the 6 flowers themselves you'd all be dead now." "I didn't know." Ichigo had something to say about this, of course. "Hey, lighten up. How was Harem supposed to know that? Anyway, if it hadn't been for her quick thinking we wouldn't have made it through that gate in the first place. I don't think anyone here but Naruto and I appreciate how serious the situation is." Everyone turned to Naruto, who had sat down in a conveniently placed chair on the porch of a home. He was asleep. Yaruchi hissed and swiped his face with her claws. His reaction was instantaneous. "Ew. What was that for?" Ryu was the first to notice. "It's quiet," he murmured with a not-so-subtle amount of edge in his voice. "Too quiet." "Yeah, is this place really the Soul Society?" asked Ichigo, looking just as uneasy as Ryu. "Yes," replied the black cat. "And the specific area we are in is called the Rukan district. It's here that souls come to life when they first arrive. Actually, it's right on the perimeter of the Sirite, where Shinigami live. It's the poorest section, but also the one with the most freedom. It has the largest population of souls in the place." Ryu glanced around. "If that's true, where is everybody?" Naruto shrugged. "Maybe they're at some huge communal orgy." This drew him some dubious looks. "What? I've seen them before. Look at those buildings over there." Ichigo was facing a group of buildings behind a wall that looked immaculate and clean-cut compared to the tenement surrounding them. It was like comparing the Hamptons to Detroit. "Why do they look so different from everywhere else?" Yaruchi, the current fountain of knowledge, answered the question. "Just forget about that." Ichigo's eyes widened in realization. "I know. I bet it's part of Sirite whatever where all the Shinigami live, all right." He charged forward. Yaruchi's eyes widened in disbelief at his stupidity. "Let's do this shit." "Wait. Stop, you idiot. You can't just go in Conan the Barbarian style and expect to live." Ichigo looked over his shoulder in confusion. Naruto looked up seeing the massive wall in the sky. Oh crap. The wall slammed down shrouding the shocked Ichigo in a dust cloud. Naruto muttered to himself about headstrong idiots. Moron. At least I can survive doing something stupid like that. Jeez. Well, Naruto looked up as a deep rumbling voice spoke out of the dust cloud. It's been a long time since anyone tried to pass through the spirit gates without a travel permit. The dust cleared revealing a giant man with armor covering one arm and the standard Shinigami garb. And I don't get many guests these days, so welcome to you little man. Well this is a nice change, muttered Naruto as he sized up the giant. The giant slammed a massive axe hilt first into the ground. He chuckled whenever you are ready, give it all you've got and good luck. The rest of the group stared at him in shock. Uryu spoke first. He's a leviathan. What kind of creature do you suppose he is? He's far too big to be a human being. Yurichi answered. He is known simply as Jidanbo. He was chosen from amongst the very best warriors the Soul Society has. His job is to guard the Hakuto Gate, one of the 4 spirit gates. Uryu blinked. He's the guard. It looks like if we have to get through this gate we have no choice but to defeat him. Yes, but that will not be an easy task I'm afraid. In the 300 years that Jidanbo has served at this gate, thousands of invaders have tried, but none have ever broken through the Hakuto Gate. Jidanbo is just that good. How in the world are we supposed to defeat something like that? Asked the Quincy. That's where your intelligence and creativity come in. The first thing we need to do is have a meeting to figure out a plan. Ichigo, you. Watch out or him come back here. Both of you, have you lost your minds? The two mentioned were running forward to Ichigo's aid. Naruto, do something Naruto. Naruto was crouched against a post reading a book he had pulled from somewhere. He was only reading with one eye and his free hand covered his mouth and most of his nose. A set of borrowed headphones and a CD player blared rock music so loud that Yurichi could hear Brian Johnson screaming thunderstruck from where she was standing. You say something honey? Yurichi twitched in rage. Her lover was going to get a good scratching after this. Jidanbo saw them running forward, so he slammed his axe into the ground, causing massive damage and making several large cracked sections of the pavement to rise up into a makeshift wall. Uryu paled. He's not only huge, he's frickin' insane. Jidanbo glared at Orihime and Chad. You two need some manners. What are you, lawless gangbangers or something? We are civilized in this city. Here are the rules. Rule number 1. Always wash your hands before you sit down to eat. Rule number 2. Don't eat food that's fallen on the floor. Rule number 3. All battles in the city must be fought mano a mano. Naruto chuckled. I can get behind that system. Don't glare at me Cape Boy, I was making a comment. The kid with the spiky orange hair was the first to approach and challenge me, so he shall be my first opponent. Then I'll come back to deal with you two. This won't take long, I promise you that. Naruto sighed, tuning it out. Ichigo told Chad and Orihime to back off, that he'd handle it. Brave move, stupid but brave. Uryu rushed forward. Ichigo, we don't have time. We should attack together so we can get past this gate. There was a slight pause. You're here too, Uryu? Naruto, somehow still able to hear over Angus Young's explosive chords, doubled over in laughter, while Orihime and Chad shared a worried look. Uryu looked like he was going to blow. There was some more conversation that Naruto didn't catch as he soared to the top of the makeshift wall. Jidanbo glanced at him. Naruto smiled and shook his head, holding his hands wide, indicating he wasn't going to attack. Jidanbo nodded and a small amount of respect glinted in his eyes. The blonde one had a sense of honor. He swung at Ichigo after a little more talk. Naruto smirked slightly. Ichigo's training had really paid off. The big guy was shocked that Ichigo had blocked his attack with one arm only. Jidanbo looked for a second like he was going to explode in anger when he started laughing. You're good shorty. I can't remember the last time someone was able to stop my axe. He then went on a spiel before attacking a second time. He then said something about a festival. Naruto wasn't really listening, preferring to tap his foot to the beat of Shoot to Thrill. He preferred watching Ichigo's reactions, which was a beepy self-assured grin. But don't get overconfident, you'll end up dead. Jidanbo started to shout out random numbers. I've never had to count this high before. He looked slightly dazed and confused. It's time to finish this. His final strike, a sideways cut, destroyed the makeshift wall, causing Naruto to leap to a rooftop, then down next to Chad. He had discarded the CD player. Naruto smiled. Ichigo had blocked again. Chad looked speculative while Uryu and Orihime were just plain shocked. Ichigo taunted the giant. The giant responded by pulling another axe, turning red and bunching up his muscles so much that the armor on his left arm broke off. He shouted and brought down both axes in a double strike. Naruto laughed. He was in for a surprise. Ichigo swung, smashing the axes and sending the gatekeeper flying. Jidanbo sat up from where he landed. Wow, what was that? Uryu said something similar. The giant got up, oblivious to his destroyed axes. He began to talk about slipping and falling until he noticed his axes were gone. "Ooh, I bet that stings." Yoruichi leaped to Naruto's shoulder after her lover's comment. "It looks like his axes have been modified somewhat." Jidanbo started to cry. Naruto could sympathize. Losing a weapon you had for so long was like losing a limb. He didn't know that from experience as he had handed his weapons off to family as gifts and heirlooms, but Tenten had drilled it into him. Ichigo said something mildly comforting when Jidanbo suddenly hugged him in his massive hands, saying how generous he was and other such things. Naruto tuned it out as he studied the wall looking for a way in. That was until Jidanbo started to open the gate for them. Well, when Ryu started to shout about Ichigo not being the group's leader, Naruto told him to shut up or he would spork him to death. Jidanbo then proceeded to lift the gate with pure physical strength. Naruto idly supposed he could pull it off as well, but there was no point. Ichigo and the others would learn nothing, nor gain nothing from such an easy victory. Jidanbo froze once he opened the gate, prompting Ichigo to question if he was alright. Someone appeared in front of them wearing a standard Shinigami uniform with a cloak the arrogant ass that had stabbed Naruto had worn. "That is the captain of Division 3, Ichimaru." Jin the fox-like man chuckled. Naruto growled. This guy seemed to be trying to emulate a fox, but he looked more like a slimy weasel. Naruto's long association with foxes and toads led to a hatred of snakes. Not a complete hatred, as most snakes were just normal animals, but snake-like people and beings gave him the creeps and he ended up just wanting to kill them. The fox snake-like man never let his smile slip. "Not good," he smirked. There was a flash of light and a huge cut appeared on Jidanbo's left arm. Jidanbo cried out in pain, letting go of the gate with that hand. Dropping it onto his back, the weight knocking him to his knees. "Unacceptable," Jin said. "Being a guardian of the gate doesn't mean you're supposed to open the gate." Jidanbo defended himself. "I defended the gate and lost. Once I lost I had to open the gate, there was nothing else I could do." He protested. Jin's smile took a nasty turn, seeming to emulate a taut leer. "What you're saying makes no sense. When a gatekeeper loses he isn't supposed to open the gate. When a gatekeeper loses it means death." Ichigo rushed to attack. His sword strike was blocked and both men leaped backwards. Yoruichi's eyes widened in shock. "Ichigo." Ichigo pointed his oversized blade at Jin. "Care to tell me just what the hell you think you're doing? What's the big idea now, just showing up and trying to butt in? Stupid frigging ass clown. Anyone who's pathetic enough to make an appearance to attack an unarmed man deserves to be killed." Naruto grinned sadistically. "A chance to fight a captain, what fun." Jin smiled as if amused by Ichigo. "You know, I think you're kinda fun, kid. You're not scared of me." It was more of a statement. Ichigo rolled his eyes. "Hell no," Yoruichi glared. "Careful boy, you must stop." "Ichigo, it's best we retreat for now." Naruto sighed in the background. Yes, retreating against an unknown opponent was smart but not fun. "Huh? Why? I'm only just getting started here. I am not going to submit to this guy. Look, I'll be fine, so just let me finish this guy off." Jin grinned. "You must be Kurosaki Ichigo." Ichigo turned, slightly worried. "How do you know me?" "You're fun, but you're predictable." Jin turned and walked away. Naruto stiffened. It was an obvious sign the guy was extremely confident in his abilities and probably had a trick up his sleeve. Ichigo didn't see this. "Wah, hey, where are you going? Hey, wait." Jin was still walking away, but his voice was loud and clear despite being soft-spoken and almost friendly. "All the more reason why I can't let you pass." Naruto glared. The weasel was toying around. He pulled out a short sword. Ichigo glared. "So why are you standing so far back? You planning on throwing that dagger?" Jin turned. "Oh, this isn't a dagger. She's my Zanpakuto." Jin suddenly whirled, going into a blade thrust stance. He whispered something as his Ryatsu skyrocketed. The dagger-like soul blade extended at an astonishing speed. Ichigo barely had time to bring his blade up to stop being impaled. It wasn't enough. The force of the blow, while not piercing through Ichigo's block, lifted him up and sent him flying into Jidanbo. Both boy and giant went flying back and the gate began to close. The gate dropped shut. Jin waved and smiled. Naruto smirked and just before it closed, punched the gate. On the other side, Jin leapt backwards as the gate rocked in its frame, screeching as it ground across the ground. "Well, isn't that interesting?" Naruto ignored the conversation the others were having and the sudden appearance of the civilians. "If we're gonna be facing guys like that, I'm gonna have to be ready at a moment's notice. And I'm beginning to like this place." A few hours later, while Chad was wandering around with some kid, Naruto had joined Ichigo on a tall rooftop. The two Shinigami sat in a companionable silence, just watching the wall that kept them from the person they had come to rescue. Naruto slapped Ichigo on the back and jumped off the tower. Heading to the old village leader's place. Once he got there, he propped his blades up in the corner, curled up into a ball and turned off the world, Metallica replacing AC/DC on his mental stage. An hour later Naruto woke up to shouting, the battery to the disc player having died. Some guy called Pig Straddler apparently was arguing with Ichigo. Naruto got to his feet and walked over to the two arguing men. Smack. Crunch. Both Ganju and Ichigo were on the floor cradling their heads. Shut up. I'm trying to sleep. Naruto went back to his corner and hefted his blade. Ganju recovered first. That's the big idea, Shinigami hitting a man when his back is turned. Ganju stared at the two wickedly sharp blades being pointed in his direction and swallowed nervously. Be quiet. If you want to fight, go outside. Ganju nodded slowly and backed away. Stupid brats, disturb my sleep. The elderly get no respect these days. Sheesh, Naruto settled back down and was out like a light. Naruto woke up again as the two were fighting outside shouting and cursing. Naruto growled. Enough. He got in between the two. Oh yes Shinigami. What makes you think you can stop me? Naruto sighed. Naruto shook his head, then punched the ground. There was a loud boom when the dust cloud cleared. Ganju stared open-mouthed at the massive crater the single strike had made in the street. Only Uruchi had seen examples of his true strength, but even she was impressed. Tsuyu, can I stop you boy? Yes sir. Are you going to continue fighting, either of you? No sir. Nope, not one bit. Good. Suddenly the large clock on the back of one of Ganju's henchmen rang. Ganju whistled and the huge boar he was riding knocked down Ichigo as it sped towards its master. Ganju was sent flying, eventually ending up landing on the back of his boar which ran off. Ichigo was knocked down by the other members of the gang as they rode their noble steeds after their boss. The next day Naruto was on the roof of the building quietly drinking tea. The sound of an argument was going on down below until he heard a cat's hiss, then Ichigo scream. Naruto chuckled. He leapt down, returned the tea set to the old man, and they were off. A few hours later. Naruto stared at the building in front of them. It was really strange. A normal rather bland house surrounded by two huge stone hands holding a flag and a massive chimney-like protrusion. Naruto ignored the two horrified morons of him, he ignored the shocked Ryu and Ichigo as he headed towards Shiba Kukaku. Halt strangers. Two voices shouted. Naruto looked up with a smile, spotting two burly-looking twins standing on the stone hands. Who dares trespass here? Foreigners. From the looks of the men, two of them are Shinigami. The two brothers jumped down. Suspicious. I, Kongahiko and I, Shiragahiko, they now spoke in unison, cannot allow you passage inside this building. Dagon. Or advance now and be killed for your insolence. Ichigo groaned. Crap. More deranged gatekeepers. This Soul Society is just one annoyance after another. Suddenly the brothers spotted the black cat rubbing itself against Naruto's leg. Master Uruchi. They were quickly led inside by one of the brothers and down a huge flight of steps. 1,000 apologies Master Uruchi, we had no idea that these trespassers were your servants. Naruto smirked. Actually we're slaves, the Shinigami are the bodyguards, the woman is his personal maid. The big guy is the baggage handler and the guy in white is the eunuch. Uryu looked horrified, but Ichigo snorted, restraining laughter. The brother turned to Uryu with a speculative glance. Explains a lot. Ichigo burst out laughing. Uruchi chuckled. It's my fault, I should have sent word ahead that me and my slaves were on our way here. Aha, you are too kind master, such generous words from such a kind person. The guard paused in front of a sliding traditional door. He kneeled. Master, we have visitors. A voice that was suspiciously not male said come in. The others had figured that Kukaku was a man. Naruto knew different. After all, Uruchi did talk about some stuff from Soul Society such as Kukaku, her division, Soifun and the various captains. The door opened. Naruto and Uruchi walked forward. The others remained frozen behind them. Well, it's been a long time, hasn't it, Uruchi? Kukaku's a woman. Came the shout from behind. Naruto snickered. You just assumed she was a man. I never said she was. Naruto winked at Uruchi, who grinned back. Well, as much as a cat can. It seems you brought some brats with you. Naruto settled down against a wall and pulled an apple he had swiped earlier out of his robe. He munched on it while Uruchi and Kukaku talked. He liked the woman already. Headstrong, beepsure, tough, she sort of reminding him of Tsunade, though he would never say to her face that she reminded him of a woman who he considered a grandmother. She certainly had the breasts for it, even though she was missing an arm. Naruto frowned slightly. He wondered where she lost it. With her arm was short black hair and stormy gray eyes. I wonder if Uruchi is planning something. She did say that meeting Kukaku would be fun. Renji turned and grabbed Rukia's shoulder just before he left the repentant cell. I learned some interesting information today. 5 people tried to get into Soul Society. The intruders were repelled. I heard that one of them had a sword as long as his body. Rukia gasped. One had spiky orange hair and the other had blonde hair and 2 blades. Rukia smiled slightly. They were both alive. If they were here, they were coming for her. Ichigo and Naruto were coming for her. The orange-haired man she felt an incredible bond with and another she respected, feared and liked as a friend. She smirked slightly. Naruto and Ichigo would blow Soul Society up if that was what it would take to find her. Naruto had fallen asleep, so the massive fire that gutted the building caused by Kukaku in her anger over a broken pipe during Ichigo's and Ganju's brawl only mildly disturbed him. "Yuruchi, is the blonde still alive?" Yuruchi nodded. "Wake up, blondie." Naruto's eyes cracked open to be greeted by the sight of Kukaku's impressive cleavage. "That's an interesting sight to wake up to." Kukaku flushed slightly. "Don't get beepy, brat." Naruto stood with a smirk. He looked around at the destroyed room. "So what did Ichigo do now?" Yuruchi chuckled slightly while Ichigo huffed from his position on the floor. The next thing Naruto knew, he was staring up at the only way into the Sirte. A cannon. "Oh hell no. You scared, blondie?" Naruto smiled. "No, actually. This is gonna be really fun." Kukaku could hear the genuine excitement in his voice. No wonder Yuruchi likes him. Kid's got a certain something, I wonder. Ichigo blinked. "Fireworks." Kukaku smirked. "That's right." She looked up into the dark ceiling far above. She shouted out to the two brothers, "Raise it up now." The floor began to shake. Naruto stared at the cavernous roof with a small smile. He ignored the shouts and exclamations from his friends, though he did flinch slightly when Harem swore he was having a bad influence on that girl. Hey, good. He walked sure-footed across the shaking room to stand beside the grinning Kukaku. The roof opened, and the dark room, which had previously been sparsely illuminated, was bathed in daylight. Kukaku smirked. "Did that scare you kids?" Naruto snorted. Nobody could scare the boy who wasn't afraid to die. Afraid of a pissed-off woman, yes, but that was a perfectly reasonable fear. Being afraid of dying a horrible painful death, please, who's afraid of that? "This is my one and only enhanced fireworks launch pad," stated Kukaku with pride coloring her normally gruff voice. Ganju, who had previously not been in the room, or anywhere nearby for that matter, seemed to just appear in front of her. "And that's the flower crane cannon." His statement was greeted by a stomp to the back of his head, courtesy of his sister, who growled out. "That was my line." Ganju moaned an apology from his new dent in the floor of the cannon's platform. Kukaku ignored her brother, "Who left you all speechless, didn't I?" Uryu frowned. "You may be a pyrotechnical whiz, but I'm still not fully convinced of it." He paused to readjust his glasses. "The idea of shooting us up into the air is completely URRGH." He was cut off as a large clear ball about the size of a soccer ball smashed into his face. Kukaku smirked while Naruto whistled and hastily stuck his hands back into his pockets before winking at the busty woman. Ichigo caught the ball, ignoring Uryu, sinking to his knees, clutching his face. "What's this?" "It's a Rias Kukaku, or a spirit core. Place your palms on it and concentrate your spirit energy." Naruto frowned. He didn't know if Ichigo had done any work in channeling his spirit energy. He had told Urahara to teach him how. If Urahara hadn't, Naruto was sure a beating was coming the store owner's way. Ichigo grunted and squeezed the ball for a second before stopping. Can someone show me how to do this?" "Yup. One hell of a thrashing." Kukaku blinked. "Any Shinigami should easily be able to do that." She raised her hand and with no effort a ball of glowing energy was floating perfectly under her palm. Naruto raised a single eyebrow and frowned slightly. A much larger ball appearing over his palm. He smirked. That training with Yuruchi had really paid off. Naruto sat on the edge of the platform and produced a notebook and started to write. He had to keep himself alive somehow in this world. Several centuries ago, when he had first realized that cross-dimensional travel was possible, he had sat down for several hours and figured out ways to be able to fund himself when he was in a different world. He had quickly realized that as long as wherever he was populated by humans, writing a good smut novel would be appreciated. He had taken a year to completely memorize the entire Ichi collection, which had by that time become a rare collector's edition find as it was no longer produced. A series of movies, remakes, comic books, action figures and all sorts of merchandising had put a permanent stop to him continuing on his godfather's legacy. However, he had already written down from memory the first book in the series and was currently working on number 2. He tuned out the following conversation where Ichigo got into a tussle with Ganju before they were both knocked flat by Kukaku, then following Ganju explaining how to use the spirit core. Naruto turned with a raised eyebrow to see a large completely circular dome covering Ganju, who stood inside with a smug grin. Kukaku rapped her knuckles against the outside of it before turning to explain to them. "This here is the cannonball." "Cannonball?" muttered Uryu in shock. "Now place close attention, everyone." Naruto put his book away and turned fully to face the fireworks expert. "If you think the only thing guarding the Sirte is that barrier," she was obviously referring to the giant stone wall, "you are dead wrong. But it isn't anywhere near that simple. That barrier is made from a stone known as sekiseki. It's highly rare, even in the Soul Society. Kukaku produced a small ordinary-looking stone from a pouch on her belt. This is a fragment of it. Naruto noticed her gathering Reiatsu in her hand the same way Tsunade did chakra and slam it down. To his rather small amount of shock, there was a perfect hole in the platform, but in the exact center was an unmarred circle upon which rested the Sekiseki. As you can see, it completely repels spirit energy. Therefore it is impossible to smash through the barrier with Reiatsu alone. Even if she picked up the stone, it is cut into a small piece such as this. It emits this field from all sides. Naruto grunted. There went his plan to dig his way in. Kukaku continued her lecture, which means that the Sirete has this spherical barrier which protects them, not only from the sky above, but even from below the ground. Which is why we use this. She rapped her knuckles once again on the ball. Ganju inside looked completely drained. Enough show and tell. He rasped, I'm tired. Kukaku snarled, suck it up. This cannonball is a special hard spiritual penetration device I invented. Her sea-green eyes seemed to light up with a fierce pride, but Naruto saw a hint of wicked mischievousness to it. In other words, if all 5 of you put your Reiatsu combined into this Kikaku, you will create a cannonball hard enough to break through the barrier. Then I'll use the flower crane cannon to launch you in, Hail Mary style. Kukaku smirked. Any questions? Ichigo stammered over something for a second before being cut off by Kukaku. Alright then, take them to the underground training chamber and teach them how to use the spirit cores. Her 2 dim-witted guards appeared and grabbed 2 people each. One grabbed Uryu and Orihime, the other Chad and Ichigo. Naruto just continued to sit where he was, chuckling to himself as he listened to Ichigo's cries of outrage and Orihime's exclamations of wonder. He picked up the drop spirit core and charged it, creating a perfect ball. Kukaku stared at him for a second before turning back to Ganju, who was slightly smoking. Oh yeah, thank you. You're welcome. Kukaku nodded. Alright, now get your ass down there and help them practice. Naruto saw Ganju's melancholic expression and got up, moving away a respectful distance, not hearing the conversation that followed. When Ganju left, Naruto slowly approached Kukaku, still writing in his book. Kukaku studied him for a long moment. So you're Yuruchi's new lover, huh? Yeah, why? Are you an old one? Kukaku's eyes widened at the rather blunt question. Only occasionally, Naruto faced her, pocketing his book, and gave her a dazzling smile, which to Kukaku's surprise, made her flush slightly. Then I doubt you would mind joining us for a little training session. Kukaku raised an eyebrow at the seemingly young bold man. She glanced at the black cat nearby, who was watching curiously. I think I'd like to see what the man who finally snagged Hairball's heart is really made of. Kukaku knew she had made a mistake when Naruto's grin took a decidedly mischievous turn, and it sounded like Yuruchi was trying to muffle some snickers behind her. Naruto grinned and moved towards her. Kukaku groaned as the person above her pressed her back into the bed sheets. They had quickly and quietly retreated to her rooms. It was still early in the day, and it would not be until tomorrow when those kids finally got the hang of the spirit balls. Blime happened. She would join them later, when Kukaku had gotten the full experience of Naruto's stamina. Yuruchi had to practically force it out of him that it had taken a full-length session, with all of his wives one after the other, together and all sorts of combinations that had lasted 4 whole days, before he had finally collapsed from exhaustion. He had however not admitted another fact that Yuruchi had deduced anyway, that fact being that when he had done that he had not been alive for 2 millennia, he had only been 30 or so, and his stamina, strength and skill etc. would have increased in all those years. Yuruchi grinned. She knew. She just knew that he would win the hearts of a couple more women while in the Sirete. She couldn't wait to find out how long he could last now. It would be an interesting experience. Naruto stretched as much as he could. He could tell the 2 sweaty, exhausted women on top of him were still awake. He smirked, looking down his chest at the rear end of Yuruchi, dripping with her fum, and Kukaku, panting off to the side, still joined to him. Why do I feel like a giant yin-yang symbol right now? This comment earned him a snicker from the pale-skinned Kukaku and a light slap to the belly from the chocolate-skinned Yuruchi. The door slid open. Hey sis, dinner's ready. What the hell? Banju made to advance into the room but was smashed in the face by a large heavy paperweight, courtesy of his sister. He dashed out of the room. Soon followed an angry Naruto who was strapping on his swords. Thanks a lot man, now you got her mad. I could have been in there for a while longer, but knew you had to go barging in. Beep blocking bastard. Banju bristled. How dare you seduce my— He froze and swallowed as a sword point came to rest on his neck. Finish that sentence and I'll turn you into a choir boy. Now lead me to the kitchen. Ganju nodded slowly and fearfully as he turned. Naruto spoke again. Besides, Yuruchi's the one who seduced her. I just got invited. Ganju blushed ferociously and walked away, refusing to look at Naruto, who smirked all the while. Naruto strolled into the room where the others were eating. Hey guys. They looked up at him, smiling, frowning and staring blandly in turn. Naruto smiled at Orihime, Uryu and Chad. Where were you, old man? Naruto raised an eyebrow at Uryu, who didn't bat an eyelash at his insult. Training with Kukaku. What kind of training? Naruto's face stretched into a sly and perverse grin. Uryu frowned, noting the other's confusion. He opened his mouth to ask for a clarification when he paused, his smile looked like his father's when he went out sometime too. Oh sweet Kami-sama, you had sex with her? Chad, who had been taking a drink, choked before swallowing and going into a fit of coughing. Harem flushed and gaped at him. Naruto shrugged. So what? We're both consenting adults. It's none of your business really, he leered at them, unless you want to hear details. They all flinched. Harem knew she would die of embarrassment if he told her about what had gone on. Uryu was fairly sickened that Naruto would share such private details, and Chad had read the draft of Naruto's first book and knew it would be put on paper anyway. He just had to pay extra special attention to make sure he picked that particular event out when he read it. Suddenly the house rocked. The four of them shared a look at Ichigo before rushing off. They came upon Kukaku shouting at Ichigo, who was surrounded by a huge ball of spiritual energy. It slowly became smaller until it was the size everyone else had managed. Its edges wavered and rolled like an ocean before Kukaku snarled out. You idiot, you have to concentrate. Ichigo stared at her. Huh? Just as the ball started to crack. Naruto closed his eyes and groaned as the heat and wind washed over his skin and the flash of light from the explosion pierced his closed eyes. He watched Ichigo and Ganju be beaten by Kukaku for their mistakes, Ichigo in causing the explosion and Ganju for teaching him how to do it. Naruto smiled. She was his kind of woman. Independent, ferocious and a total wildcat in the bedroom. Sirite. Captain's briefing room. The massive doors before the smiling Jin opened and a wizened old voice full of power rumbled out. So you're finally here, Taicho of the 3rd Division Ichimaru Jin. Jin stepped into the room, his ever-present fox-like, or as Naruto would say, Whis-like smile on his face. An unexpected summons. Tell me, should I be appalled or impressed? And look at this distinguished crowd. He glanced around at the other captains. The only one missing was Yukitake Yashiro, who was of course unable to come due to his illness. Jin feigned ignorance. The captains of the Soul Society all here just for me? His head beat back slightly. Or am I mistaken? Captain of Squad 13 isn't here. What happened? His balls drop off. Kanem, the blind dark-skinned Taicho of Division 9, answered in his soft slightly scratchy voice. He's not feeling very well. Gee, I hope he gets better. The massive Shinigami Taicho with his hair in spikes topped by bells, whose face was scarred and bore an eye patch, growled. Quit joking around. You know that's not why you were summoned here. He was Zaraki Kenpachi, the Taicho of Division 11. It is my understanding, he continued in his deep gravelly voice, that you went and played with those Ryoka by yourself, didn't you? Did I also hear that you failed? Explain yourself. You should have no trouble dealing with 4 or 5 Ryoka without backup. Jin looked at him fully. What are you saying, Zaraki? That they survived? What? Snarled the giant warrior. Jin rubbed his head sheepishly. Well, I thought they were dead. I guess my instincts are starting to fail me. Another captain spoke. His voice was soft and had an odd, less than sane tone to it that grated on the nerves. Stop all this monkey business right now. It was Kuritsuchi Mayuri, Taicho of Division 13. His odd mask with its extended chin and odd ear coverings, with a black and white face and a large hat which went way over to his left side, added to his large purple scarf, gave an overall disturbing image. There is absolutely no way that captains such as us could not tell when an opponent's signature had ceased to exist. The smallest and youngest member sighed. Hitsugaya Toshiro, Taicho of Division 10, sighed in annoyance. The short, almost 14-year-old looking Shinigami was definitely annoyed. Oh no, not again, old fools caught up in stupid bickering. Jin didn't even look at Mayuri. Are you implying that I let him go on purpose? Mayuri sneered. That is exactly what I am saying. Kenpachi took a step forward. Enough, Kuritsuchi. Can't you see I was the one talking to him first, or perhaps you'd rather be done in by me? Mayuri sneered again. What did you say? The young woman with a small-eyed body sighed. So stupid it was Soifun, Taicho of Division 2. The tall man wearing a long pink robe with flowers upon it, who was unshaven and wearing a wide straw hat, spoke up. What do you know, tempers are running high today. He was Kairaku Shunsui, Taicho of Division 8. The tall regal-looking man with a silver scarf around his neck and silver hair clasps in his dark hair was silent, letting the argument wash over him. He was Kichiki Byakuya, Taicho of Division 6. Stop. The argument was ended once and for all by the old man sitting in a chair at the head of the room. Enough of this foolishness. He was Shijikuni Yamamoto Jinrikisai, Taicho of the 1st Division and the foremost warrior of Soul Society. I should think the true reason you have been summoned here to stand among your peers has been made abundantly clear. It is the fact that you acted alone, coupled with the fact that you allowed your target to escape. How do you defend your actions, Ichimaru? He asked harshly. Jin smiled. I cannot, well, except to say that the element of surprise got the better of me. Yamamoto frowned and Jin continued. I was shocked and my reaction slowed when I witnessed the strange blonde Shinigami with the Duel's Anpikudo standing with the other Ryoka that Kichiki Taicho believed he had killed. All eyes were now upon him, especially the captain in question, but all questions were forestalled. How that Ryoka survived is of no matter. How do you defend yourself, Ichimaru? Jin shrugged. I cannot. It was a mistake and I will accept whatever punishment you see. He was cut off. Just a minute Ichimaru, it was a rather intelligent-looking brown-haired man in simple glasses. He was Sasuke's and Taicho of the Division 5. I have something I want to ask you first. Before he could voice his question, alarms rang out through the room. Red alert. Red alert. Intruders in the Sirte, all squads into position. Repeat, red alert. Those Ryoka, muttered Saraki. Jin smiled. Kukaku's home. Orihime was the first to notice Yuruchi walking into the room. Naruto grinned. His girl was still hiding her real identity, not to mention gender, by hiding in her cat form. Yuruchi patted forward, her male-sounding voice smug. So Ichigo has finally succeeded in forming a cannonball, has he? She patted over to the now sleeping Ichigo. And you watched her. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, he's just sleeping it off. I need the rest of you to go and sit over there. Orihime still looked concerned, like she wanted to rush to Ichigo and hug him until he woke up. We do not have much time until we begin our mission. I am going to tell you now what we can expect once we're inside the Sirte. You must remember that. Wah. The others stared in shock. Naruto, however, ahahahaha. He doubled over in laughter as Yuruchi screamed from the sleeping Ichigo's rough grip on her tail. Ahh, get him off me, get him off, let go of my tail, you bastard. Meanwhile. Ahahahaha. Hahaha, snort followed by muffled snicker. Oh god, haha, that's just too funny, oh man, snort, hahaha. Naruto suddenly realized he was being glared at. Yuruchi now free, her tail no longer straight nor zigzag, but more importantly she was stalking towards him. Naruto swallowed. Haha, gotta run. With that he was gone, the black cat on his heels. It's not funny. I kill you. Oh come on, it was funny. Naruto grinned. Yuruchi had caught up with him by changing back to her human form, then punished him by having Naruto service her. Not a bad punishment really. Naruto was currently outside before the cannon with the others while Ryu popped inside to summon Ichigo. Naruto eyed Yuruchi's bent tail. Well, I think it makes you look distinctive and unique. Bite me, she snapped quietly. Sure, where? Naruto replied smartly, eyeing her rump and probably making her blush. Ryu quickly arrived with Yuruchi in tow. Very well, are we all here now? Yes sir, Naruto merely grunted in response to the cat's question. Naruto used his hand to cover his smile when Ichigo stared at Yuruchi's tail. What happened to your tail, Yuruchi? It looks like one of those flexible toothbrushes. The others gasped in fear, while Naruto made an odd strained grunt, drawing a smile from Kukaku as he attempted not to laugh. Yuruchi hunched over, well as much as a cat can, and began to glow an ominous red. Her voice, though quite deep while in her cat form, became even lower and more ominous. Is there something wrong with my tail? She asked in a menacing voice. Ichigo gulped. No, nothing, it's a perfectly wonderful, beautiful tail. He squeaked in reply. Ryu leaned in and whispered in Ichigo's ear, don't you remember, you're the one who actually did that. I did. Yup. When you fell asleep after making that cannonball you grabbed Mr. Yuruchi's tail. It took 3 of us to get him loose, and by then it was too late. Ichigo turned back to the cat in question, a wince upon his features. Yuruchi in turn looked like she was about to cry. My tail, my pride and joy, ruined Orihime. Chad and Ryu sweat dropped. Naruto couldn't hold it any longer. He was rolling on the floor, clutching his stomach with tears streaming down his face. He was quickly sobered by several slashes with razor-like claws to his face. Naruto got to his feet, ignoring the hissing of Yuruchi, and brushed himself off, not caring about the wounds that had already disappeared. Kukaku noticed someone was missing. Hey wait, why isn't Ganju here with the rest of you? Ichigo shrugged. Last time I saw him he was downstairs muttering some nonsense to himself. Never fear, Ganju is here. Sang said man. Naruto groaned. Umbus. Ganju either didn't hear Naruto's comment or chose to ignore it. Naruto groaned and tuned out Ganju's and Ichigo's argument. Ioniki was killed by a Shinigami. Naruto turned, watching him carefully. Ganju, don't you dare, Kukaku began to stand by. Ganju, in a rare show of actually having a backbone, glared at her. Why don't you let me talk for a change, sister? Naruto smiled slightly at Kukaku's shocked expression. It was kind of like the one she made when he shook his head, not the time for those thoughts. My brother was a brilliant man. Ganju's eyes were far away, locked in memory. He passed the Shinigami Academy entrance exam on his first try, by then his Ryatsu was 6th class. That's the same as a divisional lieutenant. Then he finished a 6-year training course in a single year. Then he joined a training squad. Within 5 years he became a lieutenant, but he was betrayed his own agents, ultimately leading him to his grave. I was just a kid back then, so I don't remember all the details, but I remember the faces. Those two faces, the face of that cold-hearted Shinigami as he dragged my brother's mangled body back here, and the face of my dying brother. Anju smiled sadly. My brother's last words were a thank you to that Shinigami. I could never understand and still don't understand how he could do that. Somehow my brother never blamed the Shinigami, and he never hated them. He paused and Naruto grimaced. It was touching, but he hated listening to sob stories. He of course was guilty of the same thing, but he did his best not to go on and on. But how? Ganju was in full swing now. How could he keep believing in them? How could he not hate the fiends who destroyed him? He pointed at Ichigo, then Naruto in turn. You two are somehow different from the other Shinigami, that's what I think, and I think that if I go with you, I might discover something important. It's why I'm willing to go into enemy territory with you and learn what being a Shinigami is all about. Naruto grunted. It was the same as all true warrior vocations. Sacrifice, blood, sweat and tears. Anju glanced at Naruto, who nodded with a small smile. The boy had his approval. Yurichi called them over. Alright then, are you all ready for the cannonball? Yes. They said in unison. Ichigo looked thoughtful as he held the spirit core. Hey, I just thought of something. He looked up at Yurichi. Can you make a cannonball? Actually, that's a good question. I guess I'd ought to give it a try. Ryu groaned. Don't tell me this is your first time making one. Yurichi ignored him. She stalked forward, put the core down on the ground. Ichigo. Ichigo set it gently down and stepped back. Yurichi leapt onto the ball, standing perfectly balanced on it. The ball glowed and soon a perfect sphere surrounded the cat. They stared in shock and awe, and Yurichi was definitely smug about it, just as I suspected. The task was as natural as breathing in and out. Orihime gasped in awe and clapped, but Ichigo collapsed, surrounded by an aura of depression. I can see it bothers you, but I don't know why you find it so surprising. You will learn there are many things I can do that are far beyond your reach. Anju and Kukaku were talking quietly next to the cannon. Kukaku whirled and spoke loudly. If you're all ready to go, then the final countdown begins now. She smacked her fist against the cannon's massive barrel, and a large circular entrance appeared. Get inside, everyone. As they filed in, Naruto took the lead. Just before he stepped across the doorway, he wrapped an arm around Kukaku's waist and pulled her into a kiss. Kukaku tried and was unable to swear mentally. He did not just make me cream my panties, he did not just make me cream my panties was her inner mantra. Naruto broke the kiss and smirked. I'll be back, babe, then stepped into the cannon, followed by a blushing Orihime, then a growling Ganju. Once they were all inside, Kukaku sealed them in. They were spaced around the spirit core, one hand on it each with Yurichi riding on top of it. Kukaku's voice outside was muffled and unintelligible. Yurichi gave them each a pointed look. Now listen, once we are inside the Sirte, it is imperative that we stay together. If you run into a Taicho, do not fight. Do not even think about it, just run. Naruto snorted and Yurichi glared at him. That goes double for you, Naruto. Naruto just grunted and looked away. Our goal is to save Rukia, do you understand? You must avoid taking any unnecessary risks. Suddenly they could feel the rise in Reiatsu outside. Yurichi shouted, now it has begun. Pour your Reiatsu into the core. The cannonball formed. They stayed still for a moment before they were suddenly in the air with only a slight vibration, Kukaku's house far below them. Naruto grinned, here we go. Far below on the ground, Kukaku stared up at the trail of smoke leading into the sky. She smiled wistfully and whispered. May the fate smile on you, Naruto-kun, Yurichi-chan, Ganju. She whispered before she went back in the house, intent on finding a change of underwear. Up in the sky, Naruto stared out of the dome at the ground far below and whistled. Ichigo hummed. I somehow thought that blast-off would be more explosive. Anju grinned smugly. That's only the start, you simpleton. Naruto rolled his eyes. If these two idiots were going to argue all the way through their mission, then someone was gonna die. The cannonball suddenly reached the apex of its flight before it zoomed to the side, making some of them shout in surprise. Naruto watched Ganju pull out a long scroll full of kanji and began to murmur to himself. Ichigo noticed. What is that thing? Ganju grimaced and talked while still glancing between the scroll and the spirit core. These are the directions for the next stage of the launch. The first stage of the flower crane cannon. Number 2 was the blast off itself in the initial direction setting. Now we go to the secondary spell, which controls the acceleration and axis adjustment. This will help with the precision guidance. By Ichigo's blank look, he hadn't understood a word. Alright, stay out of my way if you want to land safely. He nodded slowly and turned his head to address everyone. Now there's one last thing I've got to tell you all. To enter the Sirte successfully, we have to stabilize this cannonball. That requires keeping the Reiatsu output from each of us at a constant level, and to do that keep your hand on the crystal in the center so you can see how much energy the others are releasing and simply adjust your energy release accordingly. One mistake and that's it, we'll all die. They nodded, totally focused. Banju began to chant the spell that was needed. Naruto frowned and grunted. Ichigo cut back, you're releasing too much. Alright, I'll back off. He took a deep breath and with visible effort the excess energy faded but not enough. Ryu frowned, Ichigo, you got to cut back just a little more. Ichigo's eyes snapped open. What? But I've already lowered my output by almost half. Chad frowned. Ichigo. Alright, I'm working on it. Banju continued to chant. Their argument continued, trying to get Ichigo to lower his output even more. Ganju's eyebrow started to twitch. He snapped. Would you shut up? You and your big mouth made me repeat the same line twice. He shouted at Ichigo. Don't blame me just because you can't remember your stupid little chant. That stupid little chant might just save your life if you could shut the fuck up. They growled and head-butted each other, cursing each other and glaring. Naruto watched blandly. Oh joy, we're going to die. Chad snorted at Naruto's deadpan delivery. Chad noticed something out of the corner of his eye. Hey, what's that? The argument stopped. They were coming up onto a citadel. It's the Sirte, said Ganju. Inside the captain's meeting room, no one was surprised to see Zaraki run off as soon as the intruder alert went up. He was always dying for a fight. They were shocked, however, to see Kichiki Byakuya following him at a more sedate pace. Where do you think you're going, Kichiki? Questioned Mary. The noble glared at the mad scientist. I'm going to find out how that man survived. He shot back coldly and disappeared. Yamamoto dismissed the captains moments later. Byakuya caught up with the surprised Zaraki. For a moment you can have the one that Ichimaru failed to kill, the other one is mine. The one-eyed freak nodded. If you fail again, he's free game. And disappeared. Yuichiro joined him soon after. Zaraki obviously believed the blonde man had survived on sheer luck or because of Byakuya's incompetence. The one that had faced Jin was the stronger of the two in his mind. Byakuya doubted it, but he wasn't going to tell Zaraki that. Byakuya continued to move closer to his division's staging ground. I don't know how you survived, Ryoka, but you won't again. Back inside the cannonball. Ryu grimaced. We're going to crash. Iruchi shouted. The only way to survive this is to pour in all the Reiatsu you've got. They concentrated, complying with the cat's orders. They slammed into the invisible shield around the Sirte. Naruto grinned wildly, they were so close. Yellow lightning flickered around them. Ichigo shouted something, but it was lost in the cacophony of noise. They burst through in a flash of light and a loud bang. They were through. They continued to float. Ichigo voiced the obvious question. What's going on? We blasted through the shield, but we're not falling to the ground. We're just floating here. Iruchi grimaced. Don't get separated. The cannonball was destroyed by the shield, but its residual energy will still hold us up until it dissolves. Ryu spoke. What happens then? It will coalesce into a whirlpool, then explode and vanish. We must stay together because anyone who's separated will be blown away by the explosion. Naruto grinned wickedly and Iruchi noticed. Naruto, don't do anything stupid. Too late. See you in the funny papers. They were surrounded by blue energy, the whirlpool. Naruto allowed himself to be sucked away and blown outside of it. He could hear their panicked shouting and Iruchi's cursing. You told me you would follow my orders, damn it. She was right. He had said he would, but he hadn't promised he would so he could break his word and not feel guilty. Iruchi had made him promise to her that he wouldn't die, however. Naruto slammed into and through a building. He jumped to his feet in the pile of rubble and looked up just in time to see the whirlpool explode and 4 different streams of fire land in areas a great distance from each other and himself. He grinned. I'll see you guys later. He drew his swords and his grin turned downright maniacal. Let's rock this joint. Naruto grunted as he headed in a randomly chosen direction. He was currently heading straight towards a tall white tower. He prayed that he would run into someone soon. The blonde walker's fellow agents were in predicaments of their own. Ichigo and Ganju had run into 2 very strange members of the 11th Division, while Chad was avoiding detection by very diligent scouts. Iruchi had landed by herself and was searching for the others in her cat form. Ryu and Orihime had landed in an area devoid of Shinigami. Naruto strolled casually through the Sirte. His hands were locked behind his head as he meandered aimlessly. He should have felt lucky as he could very well have been witnessing something as disturbing as Guy and Lee's sunset genjutsu, or as it was called in this world, Ikaku's lucky dance. Even if the words are confined to the mind though, fate never misses someone tempting her. Naruto halted abruptly, his mood going from curious to cold as almost 100 battle-ready Shinigami stood before him. What was odd was that their backs were to him. He walked up to the one nearest him, a plain slightly flabby man with an average katana for his Anpakudo. Hey man, what's going on? The man turned, revealing a neatly trimmed goatee. "You don't know?" Naruto shook his head, nonplussed. "I was asleep," he answered. The man grumbled under his breath. "Several Ryoka have invaded Soul Society. One landed near here and we're looking for him." He paused, looking at Naruto again. "Who are you again?" "Oh, I'm Naruto the Ryoka," the man nodded. "Huh. Nice to meet you." He looked away and Naruto grinned as the man suddenly stiffened. "Wait, what did you say?" He turned, looking back at Naruto, who merely grinned. "It's him." The Shinigami turned en masse. "What's up?" One Shinigami, who appeared to be African American, replied instantly. "Not much, bro," then paused, thought about what he said and glared at Naruto. "At him?" Naruto grinned and leaned back out of the way of the first blade to try and draw his blood. He drew his own weapons and retaliated, slashing the chest of two different Shinigami before diving into the bulk of them shoulders first, knocking several from their feet. He was in amongst them. He knew he couldn't really kill them. That would just make it more likely that the higher-ranking Shinigami would use deadly force against his friends. He spun, slashing tendons and muscle groups, nothing that the 4th division couldn't heal, but definitely taking out his victims from the fight. He flowed between his enemies, no blade coming near him, thanks to 2 millennia of honing his shinobi abilities, and the few that did come close, he deflected with his own blades. No one could touch him. He was brought out of his slightly bored haze when his right-hand blade met another with a clang. He stared at his opponent, and it was another average Shinigami who was shaking in fear at the moaning and bleeding trail of bodies behind him. Naruto sighed and simply clocked him on the head with the butt of his left blade and moved on. He turned another corner and ducked, avoiding a blade that would have taken off his head. Naruto grinned as he looked into the impassive eyes of Kichiki Byakuya. Naruto had been spoiling for a proper fight against this pompous ass. "Word up, Taicho." Byakuya just stared at him, not acknowledging the greeting. Far too much like Niji for comfort. "How did you survive?" Naruto grinned like a Cheshire cat. "To learn that, my feminine freak, you have to defeat me." "Fine." Naruto redrew his blades, deflecting Byakuya's first strike and swiping back with his offhand blade. Byakuya merely swayed out of the way. Several more blows flew over the matter of seconds until their blades locked. Naruto blades were crossed, blocking Byakuya from splitting his head in two. Naruto grinned into Byakuya's emotionless face before he reared back his head and slammed it into the unprepared captain. He was rewarded with a satisfyingly loud crack of breaking cartilage as the captain's nose shattered. Byakuya, unprepared for such an unorthodox and basically barbaric move, staggered back, trying to clear his eyes, which had watered as a natural response to the broken nose. Byakuya glared at the smirking Naruto, who had a few specks of blood on his face, none of it his own. Byakuya, had it not been beneath him, would have growled out a curse. He merely glared and readied himself to end this foolish game. "Scatter," he stared at Naruto as his blade began to disappear into countless blades. The blonde was smiling right before he winked out. "Shunpo," whispered the captain of the 6th division just as a blade slashed straight through where his own had been, gouging a deep long cut right across his torso. The wound was a nasty one, but it did not deter him. He momentarily forgot about his opponent's second blade as pain exploded in his stomach. He glared into the suddenly impassive blue eyes of his opponent, who had appeared in front of him as he withdrew his sword from Byakuya's stomach. Byakuya was not a captain for nothing. A quick Shunpo moved him away from his opponent. He gathered himself and swung his blade hilt at his approaching opponent's right arm. He, however, did not anticipate his opponent being similar to Kenpachi in constitution. Byakuya's only working theory on how the boy had survived a stab to the heart was scientific. He simply thought that, like one of the Shinigami under his command, the blonde was afflicted with dextrocardia. Dextrocardia meant that the blonde's heart, instead of being situated in the left half of his thoracic cavity, was located in his right. Byakuya surmised that he had struck a nasty, but not immediately fatal blow. He had never considered that he survived a stab to the heart simply because he was unable to die from such a simple wound. So it was natural for the otherwise calm and collected captain to have his eyes widen in shock and surprise when the thousands of tiny blade fragments that made up his Zanpakuto's Shikai state shredded his opponent's arm to no obvious effect other than his right blade being dropped. Byakuya froze when blood-drenched fingers slammed somewhere into the joint between his neck and shoulder, and a burst of foreign Ryastu flooded into his system. His eyes widened when he collapsed, his body no longer willing to listen to his commands. He stared up at his opponent as his blade sealed itself and clattered to the ground next to him. The blonde Ryoka rolled his shoulders and grinned. I didn't think that would work. Wasn't sure if introducing my own Ryastu straight into a pressure point would actually do anything. I sure wasn't expecting this." Byakuya had to agree as he couldn't even move his jaw to talk. "It should wear off, but if it doesn't, I'll leave a note or something for them to find. Judging by the look in your eyes, you thought I was going to kill you, huh? Well, I thought about it. I was damn curious as to why someone would do that to their own relation, but I'll find out one day. Lesson of the day. Don't fuck with Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto could tell by the slight hints of frustration and anger in the fallen Shinigami's eyes that he would definitely seek down the blonde when he was healed. Well, gotta go save your sis and stuff. I gotta have her around so I can take more pictures of her with Ichigo, you know, the dude with the orange hair. Naruto grinned inwardly as Byakuya's eyes darkened in rage. This could possibly backfire with Ichigo's death, but he would make sure it wouldn't to the best of his abilities. Most likely Byakuya would question Rukia about it, horribly embarrassing the young girl. Just in case, he discreetly slipped a photo of the two in bed he had taken into Byakuya's clothes. He quickly left a note in his own blood on the wall, flared his Ryastu and left. Within a minute, a small group of Shinigami arrived. The 4th Division member of the multi-divisional squad sent off a message to his division's HQ and began wrapping the captain's wounds. Within 10 minutes Unohana Retsu had arrived on the scene. After momentarily studying the message written in dripping blood, which secretly she admired as a genuinely nice gesture, she started to heal Byakuya enough to be transported to the hospital in her division. She would cure his paralysis later. She already had an idea on how to cure it, but it wouldn't do for the stubborn captain to run off with his wounds half healed. Unohana also found the temporarily paralysis fascinating, not as an attack technique of course, but something to restrain more difficult patients. She would question Byakuya on it if the source of the attack was killed by another Shinigami. Unohana could only speculate that one of the Ryoka had gotten the drop on the 6th Division captain in terms of abilities, most likely not overpowering him, simply neutralizing him by luck and underestimation of said abilities. As she readied the captain for transport, she sent off several hell butterflies to the various captains, after learning from some of the other wounded Shinigami nearby that it was the blonde Ryoka who had done it. She admired a man who had a sense of fair play and morals. Soul Society was in an uproar. Every captain save 3 were surprised to hear of Byakuya's defeat, the only ones not being Byakuya himself, Unohana because she already knew, and Kenpachi because he was so lost following Yuichiru's directions that the hell butterfly sent to him died of old age before it reached him. Captain Kanam Tosen of the 9th Division was surprised when Shuhei Hisagi read out the contents of the message sent by hell butterfly. His lieutenant was still recovering from the stab to the stomach from the same individual. The future traitor idly wondered if the blonde man followed the same path he did or was another beast like Kenpachi. He was also curious about Aizen's interest in the strange Ryoka. Itsugaya Toshiro of the 10th Division frowned. This was unexpected, Byakuya being defeated. He didn't know if it was by power, sheer luck or whether the captain of noble birth had been tricked. If the shortest captain ever ran into the blonde Ryoka, he would attack him with all he had just in case. He left his office. Guritsuchi Mayuri of the 12th Division merely thought that if the blonde was captured, he would make an excellent test subject. The captain of the 13th Division, Yukite Kishiro, merely blinked. I wonder if he's one of them, he spoke softly, confusing the two who shared the 3rd seat of his division, Kitetsu Kiin and Katsubaki Sentaro, who worked together to compensate for the vacant lieutenant position Kei Shiba had left many years ago. He exited the meeting and the officers followed suit. Captain Kairaku Shunsui of the 8th Division did nothing as he relaxed on a hillside near his division quarters. Looks like Yamajai was right. He knew that Yamamoto had spoken quietly to both himself and Jashiro about the possibility that the strange blonde Ryoka was one of them. He blinked in resignation as he left the hillside behind. The massive captain of the 7th Division, Kamamura Sajin, grumbled behind his helmet. Something strange hung in the air. He glanced once more at the hell butterfly and was gone within a blink. Sasuke Aizen's perpetual smile never left his face. If he could get the blonde to join his side, his plans would work so much better. If not, he would need to be removed before he became a problem. Ichimaru merely smiled like a fox or a snake, depending on who you ask. I knew he was different, he stated to nobody. Soifan merely gazed at her juggernaut of a lieutenant who was stuttering and mumbling about how it was impossible that Byakuya had lost to a Ryoka. Soifan thought about it and made a simple logical conclusion. The Kichiki had severely underestimated his opponent and would not do so the next time they fought. Though it was puzzling why he had been left alive, along with the rest of the downed Shinigami. Killing a captain would have been a severe blow against Soul Society. Shijikuni Yamamoto Jinrikisai let out a rattling exhale in his office as he took a final sip of tea. He set his cup down, picking up his walking stick and walked out of his office. With silence only possible through millennia of training, Naruto moved towards his location. As he rounded a corner, he jarred to a stop, eyeing the Shinigami in front of him with calculated curiosity. I have heard you described, so I know who you are. His opponent did not respond. I didn't expect to face another captain so soon, let alone you of all of them. Urahara had a great deal to say about you. Still no response. Naruto grinned. You wouldn't bother facing me yourself even though I did defeat what's his name, so that can only mean one other thing. An eyebrow arched. You know what I am. He finished. I do indeed, Walker of Worlds. Spoke the Commander-General of the Gate 13 Shijikuni Yamamoto Jinrikisai. Stuff of myths, and yet I've met two of your kind before. Do the other captains know? Yamamoto shook his ancient head. No. Only Jashiro, Shunsui and myself know about your kind. Anohana was within their presence but never knew they were different. Naruto frowned. Why are you telling me this? Yamamoto smiled slightly. I held great respect for those two, and I am willing to give you the benefit of the doubt, but may I ask why you sided with the Ryoka? Rukia is my friend. Yamamoto nodded as if that explained everything. Walkers, always willing to go to war with the world for their friends, I admire that. Thank you. I must say I'm practically shivering with excitement here. I mean, you of all people coming out to face me, this is just fucking fantastic. It's great, so shall we dance? Yes, came the slightly disappointed reply. Cool, you want to start off with normals and Pikuto, or you want to bring out the big guns? Yamamoto blinked. You have attained Shikai? I must say, even knowing what you are, that's a little astonishing, and yes, Shikai seems appropriate. Naruto nodded as he glanced around for a fleeting moment, searching for anything that could be used to decide who went first. Yamamoto, to Naruto's surprise, held out his closed fist. Naruto nodded and spoke Saisho wa GK. Yamamoto and Naruto pumped their fists once in midair and began to chant Jan. Ken. Han. Naruto smiled. You first, Yamamoto-san. Yamamoto nodded and the cane in his hands morphed into a katana with a dark red handle and a circular guard. Raijin Jaka Banch Misai Kajin Tenace. The blade was suddenly engulfed in a swath of flames, accompanied by the illusion that Yamamoto was similarly engulfed. He shrugged off the crushing spiritual pressure that Yamamoto was releasing with nary a hint of effort. He smiled and drew his own blades, crossing them in front of him. Born in the fires of creation, flying in the winds of time. Soar to the heavens to descend and scorch the earth clean of life. King of dragons, fight Bahamut. Yamamoto was surprised to see the two blades engulfed in flames, blocking their wielder from sight. When the fireball cleared, Naruto was in an odd stance, legs spread wide like a sumo wrestler would stand, and his torso was held low. His left arm was held out in front of him, palm up, fingers curled in a come-on gesture. The gigantic Zanpikudo rested on his shoulders, the hilt being held loosely in his right hand. Interesting, two blades become one. And a fire type as well, Naruto grinned. Wind and fire, actually. Yamamoto's eyebrows arched slightly before he nodded at Naruto. Ready? Yamamoto nodded. Say hello to my little friend. Naruto roared as he launched himself at the most powerful captain in the Sirte. Across the Sirte, all action ground to a halt. The captains barely remained on their feet as the surge of two huge spiritual pressures crashed down on them. One utterly crushing, the accompanying paralleling level of a new captain, but was slowly getting larger. There was no one in the immediate vicinity of the two, so collapse was not immediate, panic set in amongst the lower ranks. Seated officers, though beleaguered by fear, restored order and looked to their captains for direction. Realizing who was actually fighting, the captains looked to each other to confirm what was going on until an order came through. The order, sent previously by Commander General Yamamoto, told them to not interfere. The invaders received no such calming news. Uryu, already pale, became as white as chalk. He hadn't been prepared for such an utterly crushing feeling. Judging by Orihime shivering and supine at his feet, she hadn't been either. He had thought he was prepared, but if this was the kind of thing he could expect from a captain, he felt ready to begin doubting his survival. Tad merely glanced at the distant blow, his face neutral. Don't die, Naruto, I'll miss your jokes, he said softly. Ichigo wiped the cold sweat from his brow, then kicked Ganju. Come on, scaredy cat. He snapped. Ganju cursed him and moved to follow. Iruchi was shaking in both rage and terrible fear. She recognized both Naruto's and Yamamoto's Ryatsu signatures. Only one possibility came to her. Yamamoto must know that Naruto was a traveler from a distant world. Iruchi almost flew into a blind panic and would have transformed into her human body and used her Shunpo mastery to get to the fight and get Naruto away before she remembered Naruto's words. He had neatly avoided promising to follow her orders, but he had promised that he wouldn't die. Knowing Naruto always kept his promises eased her nerves. Not by much though. Naruto grunted as the flames from his opponent's Shikai licked at his arms, leaving mild burns that were gone almost as quickly as they had been administered. They had exchanged numerous blows, yet Yamamoto had yet to be hurt, only letting out the odd grunt of strain under Naruto's devastatingly strong sword strikes. Naruto had been burned and sliced several times, not because of lack of ability with a blade, but because of inexperience with wielding his Zanpikudo and the particular sword style that the Shinigami use, of which Yamamoto was a master. Kajiranai no Hisho. he shouted as he once again swung his blade at Yamamoto. Unlike the hollows he had used it on before, Yamamoto was simply too strong to be lifted up and sliced to pieces. He was, though, put slightly off balance by the strong wind, and dozens of small rends appeared in his clothes. Yamamoto grunted and stepped back. He discarded his haori and the top half of his uniform, revealing a scarred and slightly wrinkled, but nonetheless impressive physique. Naruto paused, letting out a low whistle. "You sure keep yourself in shape, Yamamoto-san." Yamamoto nodded at the compliment, but sighed inwardly. No doubt this has already caused a panic amongst the divisions. I must end this quickly. Naruto exhaled in exasperation. Okay, I get where you're coming from. He shook his head resignedly. Let's go. Naruto charged and swung his blade. Ryubi. A massive geyser of flame extended out from Naruto's huge weapon and snapped at Yamamoto like a whip. The elder Shinigami shunpo it to safety, appearing behind Naruto, who about faced too late. "Natajiri." He spoke aloud as he swung his flame-covered weapon in a sideways sweep, even though he was several feet from Naruto. A large writhing flame arced out from Yamamoto's blade and sliced into Naruto, who grunted in pain as the searing flame not only severely burned his entire body, but cut him in half. Yamamoto sighed and sealed his blade. Naruto's spiritual pressure had dropped sharply, but it remained high enough to prove he wasn't dead to those sensitive to these things. Yamamoto knew something was afoot. As they had fought, they had also talked to each other. Naruto had introduced himself and revealed his actual age. Yamamoto had been pleased to find someone close to his own age, even though he was still quite a bit older than the young walker. Yamamoto knew that this win had been too easy. A blow like that wouldn't put down a universe-jumping demigod for long. Naruto had to be playing dead, but for what reason? Yamamoto did not know, but he would find out. He signaled for the 4th division and wasn't surprised when Unohana appeared within moments. He was quietly thankful that he had moved the two pieces Naruto had been cut into back together, so it appeared that he had only had extremely bad burns and had almost been cut in half, not that he had been cut in half and burned to a crisp. "This one is extremely dangerous, Retsu-chan. No one but you must attend to him." Unohana nodded. The man was clearly very serious. The Sirite calmed. The intruder who had defeated Kichiki Byakuya and attacked Yamamoto had been captured. While the group Naruto had entered with didn't suspect that he had been gravely injured, two of them were glad for another reason. Tad was happy that Naruto was still alive. Yuruchi was happy Naruto had been taken alive by the insanely strong captain, even if she did suspect Naruto had let himself be captured. The rest of the Shinigami and Ryoka were just happy the pressure had faded. Deep intense blue eyes snapped open to stare into eyes that were a nice navy color. "You have a most remarkable regeneration speed, Ryoka-san, and the paralysis technique you used on Byakuya is fascinating. I would hope you would discuss it with me so I may implement it in medicinal ways." Naruto blinked, then grinned slightly, his eyes flickering over the voluptuous form well hidden behind the Shihakusho and the captain's haori. "Uzumaki Naruto, and you must be Unohana Retsu, correct?" "Indeed. Please call me Naruto, formalities leave a bad taste in my mouth. Anyways, you wanted to know about that technique?" "Yes. It would help with restraining difficult patients as well as." Unohana trailed off as Naruto laughed. "That's what it was invented for." Unohana raised an elegant eyebrow on her beautiful face in curiosity. "My grandmother was my home's greatest healer, and she specifically invented that just for me. I had a habit of slipping out of the hospital way before my release date." Unohana favored the injured man well, at least she thought he was injured, with a small amused smile. "Well, Naruto-san, you will not be escaping this hospital so easily. I am the only one allowed access to your room, and my lieutenant is outside this room and will only open the door at my voice. On top of that, you are tied down with Re-Astu ceiling restraints, so it seems you will be under my care for the near future." Naruto's smile faded. "I am sorry, Retsu-chan." Unohana blinked both at the familiar form of address and the apology. "For what?" "This." Naruto surged up out of the bed, his lips slamming into Unohana's own, making the healer freeze, only realizing her mistake when fingers rested on a pressure point between her shoulder and neck. Her body went limp and inwardly the serene but powerful woman seethed at such a rookie mistake. She would have her revenge. The Ryoka would not get far with his wounds, even if he got out of the room. "I must apologize again, Retsu-chan, as I must take a small liberty with your body." She glared at him as he straightened her from her slightly bent-over position. Just out of the corner of her eye, she could see the various straps holding him down had been untied and the Re-Astu draining cuffs broken apart. He quickly removed her haori and placed her in the bed, strapping her down and covering her with the blankets as he replaced the cuffs around her ankles and wrists. Naruto stared into her flaring eyes with a smirk before looking down at his own person. He was dressed in only boxers and bandages. He ripped off the bandages and by sheer chance, glanced over into Unohana's wide amazement-filled eyes. Unohana stared at the utterly unblemished body standing near her. Wounds that even if healed at a massively advanced pace, should have left scars, bruising, some sort of sign. He had healed in a few hours wounds that would have been fatal to most. Very troubling ideas were blooming in her mind. What if the Ryoka allowed himself to lose? Well, lose that quickly, simply because it was the most prudent means to achieve his goals, whatever they may be. His wounds contradicted this idea, but what if he had a superb control over his own body and allowed his healing factor to remain dormant? Feigning injury until he was placed alone in this room, then healed in a matter of minutes or even seconds, wounds that would take several weeks for even a captain to heal from. Now I know what you're thinking. Naruto can't get out of this room, well let me show you a little trick. Anohana became greatly intrigued when she found herself staring at someone who looked identical to her, down to the last iota. Open the door please, Anohana said in a voice that even sounded like the original. The door cracked open, and Naruto smiled softly at the person on the other side who was obviously her own lieutenant. If only Aizen would step into the room or even peer at the bound form, which was obviously that of a woman's. Ah, I believe Ryoka-san here should have some clothes on hand. He is healing quite nicely and should be able to be transferred to a holding cell sometime tomorrow. Would you mind fetching a Shihakusho for me? I will wait here for your return. Naruto requested in her own voice. Right away Taicho, Aizen affirmed as she closed the door. Anohana would have groaned if she could vocalize anything. Naruto merely stood in her form, rocking back and forth on his heels and humming quietly to himself for a few minutes. Soon enough, there was a knock on the door. I have the clothes Taicho. Lieutenant Kitetsu Aizen called. Ah yes. Please come in and place them by the door. Aizen stepped in and quietly closed the door behind her, then stilled. She stared at Anohana, bound and unmoving in the bed, then the Anohana grinning madly standing next to the door. But thus she managed to get out before a hand slammed into her neck and she dropped like a stone. Don't worry, she'll be up and at 'em in a little bit. Naruto quickly stripped and wasn't surprised when Anohana didn't blush. She have most likely stripped him herself to apply bandages, so she had seen it before. Naruto dressed then walked over to Anohana, pecked her lightly on the forehead and received a confused glance. Hot Aretsu-chan, and then he was gone. Anohana sighed as she cursed herself for making the mistake of thinking she could be in control every time she had an invader in her ward. Naruto had already found his Zanpakuto under lock and key in what was obviously Anohana's office, while the office itself was not locked. A strong kick had done it for the lock chest that held his weapons. With them retrieved he was gone, racing across the roofs of the Sirte when he came across a sight that made him stop dead, then lie prone on the roof tiles. The sword was impaled into a blank wall, but a group of people standing in the courtyard some distance below stared up at it in horror. The woman screamed. He peered over the edge. The gathering of people was staring at a sword impaled into a wall and nothing else. He frowned when one of them, a small woman, staggered forward and fell to her knees screaming. This place was screwy. He backed away and dropped down the side of the building, disappearing from sight and ignorant of what had actually transpired in the courtyard or how it would ultimately affect the future. While repercussions of Aizen's apparent murder were echoing throughout the Shinigami ranks, other important events were happening across the Soul Society. Ichigo, having defeated and fought Madara Mikaku, had moved on. Ganju, having acquired Yamada Hinataro as a hostage ally, had faced down and defeated Aburai Renji, who this time was at full power unlike their previous confrontation on Earth. Ichigo was now facing, much to his friend's horror, one of the strongest captains of the Sirte. Zaraki Kenpachi of the 11th Division. Tad had smashed his way through a good portion of the 8th Division forces but was defeated quickly and without grievous injury by Kairaku Shunsui, Taicho of the 8th. Who ironically was being sent to the prison section of the hospital from which Naruto had just escaped. In testament to his luck, bad as it may be, Naruto had run headlong into another confrontation. Naruto was running down another of the seemingly endless identical pathways that made up the home of the Shinigami when he sensed something and slowed to a stop. He drew his blades just in time to deflect a Kusarigama-like weapon that was aimed for his head. Naruto jumped, tucking into a tight spin to dodge several more swings from the weapons, two identical blades attached by a chain. He landed in a crouch, bringing up his blades to stare at his opponent. We meet again, Ryoka. I'm sorry, do I know you? Asagi Shuhei face faulted hard. He surged to his feet, quickly growling. You stabbed me, dipshit, Naruto shrugged. I stab a lot of people. You and that other dude ain't much more than two extra faces on a long list. Asagi gritted his teeth in anger at the blatant disrespect this Ryoka was showing everyone. I don't know what trick you pulled on Byakuya Taicho to defeat him, but it won't work on me. With a growl, Shuhei leapt forward, using his odd Zanpakuto to full effect. Naruto grinned. People who used Kusarigama as weapons were generally dangerous to a person with a normal sword, what with the ability to strike from a distance and to entangle the opponent being key. Therefore people who actually knew how to use one were several times more dangerous, just like this guy. Their weakness was relatively simple. Get close to them, or get them close to you actually, doing that was kind of tricky. Naruto grinned as the lieutenant, in extremely rapid movement, entangled most of his right arm and his Zanpakuto in said hand with a simple deceptive movement. He deliberately made an ineffectual swipe at the chain with his other sword, ignoring how the blade of the Kusarigama wrapped around his arm and pierced the flesh of his shoulder. Shuhei then made his mistake. He shifted his weight slightly, no doubt in preparation for another attack, but it was just what Naruto needed. Shuhei had believed for a moment that due to preparation, foreknowledge, surprise and a little luck, he'd caught his opponent. That all changed as his eyes widened in alarm, then finally bulging in pain before he lost consciousness. His opponent dropped the weapon in his trapped arm and kicked the butt, sending the Zanpakuto whipping through the air to embed itself into the Shinigami's thigh. An abrupt yank of strength comparable to a captain's pulled him off his feet and face first into a very hard fist. Naruto smirked to himself slightly as he picked up the Zanpakuto he dropped to punch the surprised lieutenant and calmly removed his sword from the man's thigh. As an afterthought, he tore off part of the unconscious Shuhei's uniform to bandage the wound. He was walking away when a strange high-pitched noise sprung up from nowhere. It didn't seem to be an attack until it cut off. A hushed whisper and the unmistakable shuffle of sandaled feet came from behind him. He whirled, coming face to face with a man who appeared to be of African descent who was in captain's uniform. He wore some kind of visor over his face. Naruto immediately recognized the blind man by the description given to him by Urahara. Panem too, he looked up in time to see hundreds of metal blades inches from penetrating his body. Panem Tosen deflated as his attack killed the Ryoka. Aizen-sama would not be happy that he had killed the mysterious Shinigami, but Tosen couldn't allow a man like that to live. He could not let Soul Society generate another unstoppable demon like Kenpachi. He stared with sightless eyes at the place his attack landed for a moment before sheathing his sword. He made to turn when he felt an unnatural movement of airbrush across his skin. He inhaled and made to draw his sword. Agony cut a path across his torso as he was slashed before pain erupted in his stomach as he was run through with another blade. Tosen gagged. This was impossible. How had he dodged it? He fell to the ground, his hand dropping limply from the hilt of his sheathed blade when a voice whispered in his ear. It takes a man to kill a monster boy. Before he blacked out he realized he must have spoken aloud while musing about his attack. Before he blacked out he could hear the Ryoka walking away whistling a merry but strange tune. Yep, definitely another Zaraki. Those words, what did he mean by that? Did Tosen need to find some inner resolve before he could defeat a being like that? Yes, that was probably what he meant. Panem Tosen passed peacefully into unconsciousness moments before a squad from the 4th arrived to see him treated. Naruto was en route to the last place he'd felt Ichigo be when he saw a tall, lithe, curvy and very naked figure rushing across rooftops, carrying an unconscious Ichigo on one shoulder. He shunpoed next to her where she promptly tossed Ichigo to him and reverted to her feline bpog. What happened to him? The Catwoman replied tersely, either angry at Ichigo or at him. Probably both. He fought 2 high-powered Shinigami, one of them a lieutenant and one before fighting to a draw with Kenpachi. Where the hell have you been? She demanded angrily. Fought a bunch of weak guys, managed to get the drop on that Byakuya guy, he underestimated me, fought Yamamoto and let him beat me. Escaped from a hospital run by a total babe, saw some weird event thing, and severely wounded the blind captain and his lieutenant. He heard Yuruchi chuckling to herself as they rapidly approached a cliff. They both scaled it with ease, happening upon a hidden door. Naruto had heard about the place, so if he was ever seeking asylum, he could hide, but he never expected it to be so remote. Yuruchi changed back to human form and with Naruto, who for once was showing actual seriousness by ignoring her nakedness to help save Ichigo's life. When they got the boy stabilized and resting comfortably, Naruto sat against the door with Yuruchi back in her cat form, curled up in his lap and purring as he stroked her ears. He dozed off as he waited for Ichigo to wake. The feeling of Yuruchi jumping off his lap woke him up. Naruto cracked an eye to see Ichigo had finally rose from his near comatose slumber. "Ah, you're finally up," murmured Yuruchi, alerting the injured boy to their presence. "Yuruchi, Naruto, you guys saved my life, didn't you?" Yuruchi snorted. "I saved your life. This fool only turned up later on when we were almost here and you survived because of your strong life force. Without that, you never would have survived such serious wounds no matter what I did." Ichigo blinked. "Wounds?" His eyes glazed over as he obviously recalled his fight with Kenpachi. "That's right, and I actually thought he killed me for a second there," he muttered before becoming pale. "Oh no," he shouted, suddenly sitting up, making Yuruchi let off a strange yelp that sounded as if it didn't know whether to be male or female. "Damn it," Ichigo swore before grunting in pain, grasping his bandaged belly. "Don't move, you dolt. You'll just open up those wounds. Don't you realize how badly you got hurt?" Naruto remained silent, enjoying watching Ichigo making an idiot of himself. Ichigo ignored the warning, tossing his sheets off and attempted to get up. I gotta go help Chad, I think he's in danger. Ichigo let out another exclamation of pain when Yurichi pounced on his face, knocking him flat on his back. Chad is okay, just relax. Yurichi jumped off as Ichigo took an ineffective swipe at her. Orihime and Uryu are fine too. Ichigo glanced over at Yurichi, obviously expecting an explanation. Chad was lucky to fight who he did. He left him wounded but alive. Uryu and Orihime have avoided confrontation and so far haven't suffered a scratch. Naruto caused even more trouble than you, taking down almost an entire division, fighting 3 captains while severely wounding 2 of them, as well as a lieutenant, and managed to escape after being captured. That's good, Ichigo admitted as he finally relaxed. World-hopping son of a bitch. Stop making me look bad. So you just stay here behind the barrier and rest. Ichigo murmured in agreement to Yurichi's orders. Half your organs were crushed after all, if it hadn't been for this thing. She said, pushing up a broken mask that looked similar to that of a hollow. You would have been sliced in half. Fortunately for you, it seems to have absorbed most of the impact. She manipulated the mask around a bit with her paws before she leveraged it up to fully show it to Ichigo. Ichigo stared at for a moment. That thing was on me. Ichigo went on to explain how he had apparently lost it when a guy named Hinataro had thrown it away, thinking it was evil. After a small argument, Ichigo gave up the mask to a wary Yurichi who moved it into a corner of the room. Well, you certainly are strong. That's very surprising. Yurichi looked curious. What do you mean by that? Well, you said you were almost here when Naruto showed up, so you must have carried me all that way despite being so small. Ichigo explained, looking rather confused at Yurichi's lack of understanding. Oh. Lifting things is no problem for me once I revert to my original form. Naruto hid a smirk, he knew what was coming. Alright, original form, I forgot, muttered Ichigo before he blinked. Wait a sec, what did I just say? Original form? He repeated. I've never shown you and your friends my original form. Having come this far, there's no reason to keep it hidden anymore. Ichigo just blinked in confusion as Yurichi backed up a small distance. Behold the most awesome, smexy and badass Shihoin Yurichi. Yurichi proclaimed, half joking, half serious. She began to glow as smoke emanated from her paws. She rose slowly, her form obscured by the smoke before finally appearing solidly and clearly in the form Naruto knew and loved, almost on a daily basis. Ichigo started, his jaw hanging slack as he tried to pronounce something. He awkwardly pointed at Yurichi, still unable to move words from his brain to his vocal cords. You're a girl. Yurichi smirked. I get that a lot. I guess most people assume I'm a man because of the voice I use as a cat. She stalked forward with a sultry sway to her hips. No matter how many times I do this, it's always fun to see the reaction I get. Though honestly, I expected someone like you to handle it a bit better. I thought you were a cat. Ichigo mumbled and Yurichi's smirk changed to a grin. Cats don't talk, Ichigo. Put some thought into it. Ichigo hung his head in shame, but it snapped up when Naruto, rolling his eyes, drawled out. Umbus. Anyway, Yurichi placed emphasis on the word, drawing attention away from the conflict that would imminently erupt. That's enough surprises for now. Ichigo's eyes stayed on her face for a total of 3 seconds before drifting down to her chest, which was just below his eyes as she crouched. Naruto couldn't blame him, she had a nice chest. Yurichi began to explain how she got him there when Ichigo turned a bright glowing red. Ah. Would you please put some clothes on? A few minutes later, Yurichi was getting dressed. Oh right, sorry about that. Ichigo, who had turned his back on her, glared at Naruto, who was calmly watching Yurichi dress. Look away, you lech. He snapped. Naruto blinked. Why? Yurichi is the girlfriend I've been telling you about all this time. He was about to scream at Naruto for not revealing this before when Yurichi interrupted. I'm surprised, Ichigo, you're more innocent than any hard ass should be. Is this the first time you've seen a girl naked? Ichigo blushed and crossed his arms, hunching over like a petulant child denied a toy. Never mind, he grumbled. Do you want another look? Life is short and you might not get a chance to see a hot eye like me again. Ichigo turned to glare at her, not realizing she had lifted up the shirt she'd slipped on while speaking. Stop tempting me. He shouted before blushing and turning away when he saw her state of dress. Yurichi sighed, looking over at Naruto, who just never stopped looking amused. Naruto wasn't kidding when he said you didn't have a sense of humor. You really should take it easy or you're going to end up with an ulcer or something. Ichigo grunted and then bellowed at the top of his lungs. Would you please put some pants on? Byakuya's spiritual pressure became detectable shortly thereafter. Ichigo, ignoring his wounds, stole Yurichi's device for flight and rushed out the door. Mother. Fucker. Yurichi swore as he took off. Naruto, you know how to find the training ground. Yep. Good, go there. I'll grab Ichigo and bring him there later. You make sure there's no one around to spot us." Naruto rushed off without preamble. He encountered no resistance, what with Iriatsu boiling out from the prison where Rukia was had drawn all the Shinigami away from the hidden training ground. Roughly 10 had passed when a clearly fatigued Yoruichi arrived with an unconscious Ichigo draped over her shoulder. "Stupid boy tried to fight Byakuya in his condition, and it appears he healed from the wounds you inflicted on him earlier." Ichigo drew in a breath as he awoke and grabbed Yoruichi by her collar. He started to question her when a blade came to rest against his neck. The Catwoman smiled. "Relax baby, Ichigo just wanted to know why I knocked him out." The blade was withdrawn and Naruto grunted in a reluctant acknowledgement. Ichigo, sensing the danger had passed, once again turned his wrath upon Yoruichi. "Damn you. Why did you take only me and not the others? I was the only one who had a chance of surviving back there, and now the others will be killed because of you." Ichigo rambled furiously. Yoruichi remained calm and unmoved. "Don't be so vain. None of you, except probably Naruto, could have survived against Byakuya, and not even he could have prevailed against both of the captains there." "I could too," Naruto pouted, only to pale slightly when Yoruichi glared at him, and it wasn't the usual feminine glare of doom, or the "it's the couch for you tonight" glare. Oh no, it was the dreaded "I'll have your beep" and not in a good way glare. He quickly silenced himself. Ichigo looked like he was going to strike her, but with a simple push, she flipped him onto his back. "Stop thrashing around. Do you want to open up those wounds again?" Naruto drawled again. "Why don't you both go fuck yourselves?" Naruto's face lit up like a Christmas tree as he slipped an arm around Yoruichi's waist. "Good idea." And started to pull her away only to receive an elbow to the gut and a mischievous smile that clearly said later. "Why didn't you take any of the others, or at least Rukia? I could only carry one at a time. Besides, out of everyone, only you and Naruto could defeat Byakuya, and even then, that may be giving you too much credit. I'm going to help train you both so you can defeat him and Naruto can face off against some of the others. They'll all be fine." Captain Yukitake was there. "He's Byakuya's superior and a good man. Even with Ganju being an invader and Hinataro a traitor, he wouldn't kill them simply for trying to save Rukia's life. I'll train you to take on Byakuya and save everyone with your own hands." Ichigo slowly rose to his feet and gave Yoruichi a long hard stare. "Let's do this." Yoruichi grinned and took a few steps back and with a short hop was standing on a large rock. It was the first time Ichigo noticed that he was standing in a large enclosed room much like the one under Urahara's shop. Yoruichi went on to explain to Ichigo, as Naruto already knew this information, as he had been trying to achieve Bankai for a while, about the second and final level of his Zanpakuto's abilities. She also explained how all of the captains save one could do this. As she talked about Kenpachi, Naruto hid a grin. He'd have to fight that guy sometime. Yoruichi went on to explain about the spirit transfer dolls and how they could help achieve Bankai. She gave Naruto one and told him to go to the other end of the training room while she supervised Ichigo's attempts. Naruto walked a fair distance away before stabbing both Zanpakuto into the life-size doll. With a flash of flame and a burst of wind, both aspects of Bahamut, the large oriental dragon and the man in armor appeared. "You wish to achieve Bankai?" they stated in unison. "Yeah. I was told I would have to beat you." The twin-bodied soul-sharing being looked entirely too amused. "That would be pointless. We both know everything you do, and with our boundless energies, we would simply destroy each other in endless battle. No, you need to make a realization, a dark knowledge you already know but refuse to admit. This knowledge could very well break you and turn you into a monster no one in this world could possibly defeat. Or it could galvanize you and change you into the god you need to be to survive the trials that will come in your life. What is this knowledge? You already know it, you have just not realized it yet. If you never realize it, you will die here. I will ensure to destroy you. I cannot in good conscience allow an insane walker to be unleashed upon this world. Think to your past, to your present and your future, and you will realize the truth." Naruto hated this cryptic bullshit, but he sat down with a sigh while the Zanpakuto just continued to calmly watch him. Could it be his status as a walker of worlds? But what did that have to do with it? Just because back home in times of peace he felt a little restless and less training, sparring or in the presence of loved ones, he could live a life of peace for all eternity if he wanted to. No, that sounded boring. It sounded weak and disgusting, but where was this coming from? He had strived for peace between his home nations as a child and had finally achieved it through war. War. A dirty, disgusting business that he completely and utterly enjoyed. He enjoyed the rush of battle, of surviving, of defeating opponents. He felt alive on a battlefield. He had slowly gotten stronger over the years in spite long stretches of stagnancy. He had gotten faster, he picked up new fighting styles, weapons and jutsu with a speed a Sharingan user would be envious of. This didn't make any sense. He was good at war, at every aspect of it. He was at home in battle, but what did that make him? A fiend. A monster. Maybe it made him someone who lived for war. Someone who couldn't truly exist without conflict, without fighting for his life. Whether that placed him with anything from the depths of hell was debatable. Did that mean he was going to spend the rest of eternity, or however long he lived, traveling from world to world and fighting countless battles and wars either alone or alongside friends and loved ones? A life lived making and ending war. An eternity of battle against an endless horde of powerful foes sounded like fun. He had long ago accepted that it was quite possible he would outlive Yuruchi and whoever else he fell for while in this world. He had accepted that possibility the first time he had been cut in half and simply rejoined. An eternity of war, of death, pain and suffering. He refused to let that beat him. He'd face eternity head on, head held high and swords in hand until his final breath. Naruto smiled and was shaken from his thoughts by a gauntleted hand upon his shoulder. That was the hard part. The realization that you will not know peace until the day you die could have driven you mad. The easy trial is now. What's that? Don't die. With the speed of greased lightning, the armored specter drew his blades and rammed them through Naruto's heart and stomach. Yuruchi watched as Ichigo crawled into the hot spring and was about to go looking for Naruto, as all she had felt of him in the last day had been a single large spike of Ryastu and then nothing. She was about to take off when something changed. She couldn't tell what, but some sort of pressure buffeted her from all sides like a particularly fierce wind. Ichigo was clearly feeling it too as he looked around in a panic. The ground started to shake. Hell, everything was shaking. The ground, her, the walls, the roof, even the very air itself vibrated. She saw Ichigo mouth something to her. It looked like he was yelling, but no sound was coming out of his mouth. That's when it hit her. This wasn't spiritual pressure, it was a sound. Then she began to hear it as she focused, listening for whatever was causing this phenomenon. It was one long impossibly loud note. It was a voice, but not that of a human. It was a roar. It ended almost as fast as it started, leaving an almost deafening silence and the ground still suffering from tremors. Ichigo quickly whipped on his clothes and rushed after Yuruchi. They arrived to find the air smelling faintly of smoke and flame. What was once the ground was now a convex pane of jagged glass. Naruto lay supine in a huge crater. His blades were stabbed into the ground on either side of his head. Ichigo hurried down the false window, Yuruchi hot on his trail. The golden-eyed woman grabbed at Naruto's head with her hands, gently stroking his cheeks and calling his name. When no response came, Yuruchi looked as though she was about to start crying. As her eyes burned and her first tear threatened to fall, her blonde lover snorted. For a moment Ichigo thought Naruto was laughing at them when he snuffled slightly under his breath and rubbed his face against Yuruchi's palm. Ichigo noted that Yuruchi, while holding it back before, had started to cry. The woman who he had only experienced as either a playful tease or a harsh taskmaster seemed strangely vulnerable as she gazed down on the blonde-haired man. She smiled and kissed his forehead and gestured for Ichigo to help her move him to the hot spring. After a momentary bit of confusion caused by leaving without his Zanpakuto, they had him back to the sleeping bags where he was snoring softly under the watchful gaze of his lover. Ichigo was dutifully a good distance away, resting behind a rock. He would have been closer had Yuruchi not stripped Naruto to the waist, stripped herself and slipped them both into the one sleeping bag. When Naruto woke, it was with an insane smile on his face. He had seen his Bankai, he had felt its power and knew that in single combat, it was utterly useless. He was better of using his Shikai and his natural abilities. He would keep it as a trump card, not even telling Yuruchi well, he'd probably cave on that one if she withheld something like sex or maybe those pancakes she sometimes made. He could really use one of them right now. He sat up and looked around. He saw only Yuruchi's head as she obviously watched over her Padawan training, and he could feel someone else's receding Ryatsu off to the left. He got up and ambled over to Yuruchi after getting dressed. Who's the other guy? Yuruchi didn't even blink. Renji. He's achieved Bankai, so he's going off somewhere. He's on our side now, trying to rescue Rukia. Naruto grunted and decided what he was going to do until the time to stop the execution. He would train, it was that simple. Ichigo was running from Zangetsu, looking for both a new blade and a position to attack from when he came to a dead stop. He sensed more than saw Zangetsu stop. He could almost feel his Zanpakuto's shock at what he was seeing. He presumed Naruto was training, but his method was insane. Naruto had apparently rammed a long wooden pole into the single biggest boulder he could find. If Ichigo could guess, it would weigh a couple of tons. Using the pole as a hilt, he was going through a kata using the boulder in place of his sword. Naruto paused, looking confusedly at them. What? Then he blinked and smiled. Oh right, time to double up. He said cheerfully and seemed to pull an identical boulder on a pole out of nowhere and use both of them. Is he? Ichigo asked. Yes, an interesting training method, replied his weapons avatar. Yuruchi appeared at their side. So that's what he was doing with those boulders. He's probably a bit bored. They're not as heavy as the weights your Harem made for him back home. He's probably doing that thing he invented. Thing he invented? Asked Ichigo, naturally curious. Yeah, he invented this training style. It takes a huge amount of both control over your own body and sheer concentration to keep it up. Basically, he's forcing all the muscles he's currently using to push against each other, using them to create more resistance in his movements. Like fighting submerged in mud. Ichigo whistled and had to duck a swing at his head from Zangetsu. Bastard, still making me look bad. Unohana thought she was using about 50% of her composure to keep from gaping as the orange-haired boy stopped the Sakyoku, and she believed another 25% disappeared when a loud juicy crunch came from somewhere from behind her. Turning, she was surprised at how utterly unsurprising it was to see the mysterious blonde Ryoka behind her, munching happily on a large apple. He turned his head towards her, raising an eyebrow. Apple? Offering her another juicy bright red apple he pulled from within his robes. Unohana licked her lips. Those apples did look really good. She hesitantly took the apple he was offering. Where did you get them? He shrugged. Stole them from some orchard. Nuo? Who has dared to steal the prize-winning apples of the Kichiki orchard? Unohana stifled a small moan as she bit into the juicy and crunch apple. She would have to learn where he got them. Since he was most likely going to die in the next few minutes though, she would have to learn on her own. Life was so troublesome sometimes. Apparently no one else had noticed that Naruto was actually there up until this point. A sudden gasp was all the warning Naruto had as he ducked an attack from a petite woman with black hair. In the split second that the short captain of the 2nd division hung in the air above him, her mouth open in a snarl, Naruto rammed his half-eaten apple into her mouth with enough force to both choke her and send her tumbling. As Soifan spluttered and coughed up the remains of the apple, she looked up only to be kicked across the face, sending her skidding across the plateau. As she once again rose to her feet, she witnessed her blonde attacker move with effortless grace as he dodged attacks from her own vice-captain, as well as the vice-captains of Unohana and Yamamoto. He leaned out of the way of an attack by the silver-haired Sasuke of Chijiro, Yamamoto's aide, and grabbed his face. In a show of monster strength, the blonde Ryoka lifted the vice-captain and slammed him head first into the ground with a massive boom. Chijiro was left lying in a large crater, unconscious, and no doubt suffering from a severe concussion and possibly a cracked skull. While rising from his attack on Chijiro, the Ryoka flipped onto his hands and kicked out with both his feet, driving them deep into Lamida Marichio's sizable gut. Doubling over the huge noble, pulling his feet back and tucking up into a ball while still remaining on his hands, he pushed up, making his feet connect with Amida's chin. The fat man went down like several hundred kilos of bricks. While in midair, Naruto flipped and landed in a crouch. With a spin he tripped up Kitetsu Aizen and stood as she fell, ramming the ridge of his hand into the side of her neck while she was still airborne. Soifan remained grim. The man was obviously an expert hand-to-hand combatant, and yet she had never seen such an effective cross between a graceful fighting style, such as that of her traitorous former captain Yuruchi, and such brute force like that of the 11th division. As she rushed him simultaneously with Captain Kichiki, he leapt upwards, landing perfectly on the execution stand. It was then that Yukite Kishiro and Kairaku Shunsui, captains of the 13th and 8th divisions respectively, made their move. Yukite, having just arrived, used a Shihoin shield together with Kairaku to attack and destroy the Sakyoku, which had been gearing up for another attack on Ichigo and Rukia. Naruto whistled appreciatively as the massive phoenix exploded after noticing that Rukia was craning her neck to stare wide-eyed at him. Naruto decided to speak up about his presence at the execution stand. "Hello, Soul Society," he exclaimed with all the solemn gravity he could muster, which was all destroyed by the mischievous smirk on his face. "In a while, Rukia." Rukia just continued to gape at the man she had thought she saw die. Naruto noticed a flicker of movement below and believed that the short woman was preparing to attack again. To both Rukia and Ichigo, Naruto appeared to mutter something under his breath when he flickered and disappeared using Shunpo. Soifan blinked as the blonde Ryoka appeared in front of her with a Shunpo that was considerably faster than her own, both his hands were pointed towards her. "Soren Sakatsui," he bellowed. Soifan and Unohana, who was directly below her, dived and used Shunpo respectively to get out of the way of the double-barreled version of Sakatsui. Soifan rushed the Ryoka, hoping to get in a fatal blow before he attacked again. He reappeared above her and shouted out another high-level Kido attack. Berkoho. A massive blast of yellow energy struck the ground where she had been standing. As she once again dived out of the way and rolled to her feet, a strong, muscular arm wrapped itself around her throat. Another arm shot over her shoulder, the palm of its hand pointing directly at Yamamoto. "Iijekizaki Shintenreho." The voice in her ear whispered, and one of the most powerful Kido attacks launched itself towards the head captain. The commander knocked the spell aside with a swing of his sword. The spell, though powerful, was both underpowered due to lacking an incantation and due to being made by an amateur. She jammed her elbows backwards into the ribs of the Ryoka, who backed off before aiming a sharp kick at her legs. She jumped up and kicked out, making him duck. They quickly descended into hand-to-hand combat. Soifan's impression that he was skilled in hand-to-hand combat was blown out of the window. It was quite obvious that he was holding back, and his style seemed to shift and change almost constantly. One moment he was fighting with a brutality worthy of Kenpachi, allowing her to land heavy strikes, simply so he could land a blow on her in return, and the next he was flowing, leaning, dodging and jumping out of the way of her attacks, like his bones were made of water. Behind them even more was taking place. Yukitake and Kairaku had fled with Yamamoto hot on their tails. Ichigo, seeing Naruto playing distraction, had attempted to flee with Rukia but ended up passing her on to Renji so he could battle Byakuya. Anohana had collected the injured on the field and taken them back to the 4th Division HQ. The pair of golden eyes watched the fight that was steadily getting more vicious, realizing that Naruto could very well kill Soifan if she got him mad enough. Intervention. Naruto blinked as a blur snatched Soifan away from him. It was obviously Uruchi taking her former student somewhere to battle. Naruto was not put out in any way, due to there were still battles to be fought. With the exception of Ichigo and Byakuya a short distance away, Naruto realized he was alone. Nuts. What the hell am I going to do now? So many options: explore, prank, wait here, sleep. Ah, screw it, I'm going exploring. Uruchi was beating Soifan without even the aid of his Anpakudo, and the rest of the Ryoka were slowly heading towards the execution grounds. Ichigo was slowly but surely ensuring that Byakuya ate all of his arrogant and noble assumptions. While all this exciting stuff was happening, Naruto was just plain lost. He expressed his opinion of his situation in a way that made a young martial artist trekking through some forgotten forest with a massive backpack in a dimension far, far away sneeze loudly. Where am I now? Huffing in annoyance, he walked through the fancy door in front of him. Beyond that was another long walkway leading to a building sitting in the middle of a lake. The door to this building was barred, or at least partially barred. A huge hole had been smashed through it. Now that is interesting. Increasing his pace, he entered the previously uninteresting building and walked through a large cavern-like room to the only source of light. Upon entering yet another doorway he whistled, drawing the attention of the room's sole living occupants. That's a lot of dead old guys. What happened here, kid? It amused Naruto that the tall strawberry blonde woman with a bust that reminded him of Hinata once she had grown up turned her head to hide a smirk while the kid in the captain's outfit frowned deeply. What are you doing here, Ryoka? Is this monstrosity you're doing? Questioned the midget. Nah, I just got here. I was up at the execution grounds and I got bored. Besides, from the smell and the color of the flesh, these guys have been dead at least a week. Hitsugaya blinked and Ranjiku openly gaped as the blonde Ryoka figured out immediately upon entering a room, something that had taken the short captain at least a minute and a half to figure out. Hitsugaya Toshiro, knowing that not attacking the Ryoka was going against currently issued commands, decided to go against them anyway, as they were most likely issued after the Central 46 were dead. Can you tell us anything else? The Ryoka beat his head then sniffed deeply. He repeated it a few more times before frowning. Funny, this place smells like that sword. Sword? Toshiro asked with a frown. Yeah, this sword was stabbed into a wall in a courtyard somewhere. But for some reason, some short cute girl was screaming at it like someone had died. It was really weird. Toshiro frowned in confusion. The Ryoka was obviously talking about the site of Aizen's murder, but he was acting as he had seen only Aizen's blade, but not his body. Why would he think that? Toshiro was about to ask more in-depth questions when a voice interrupted them. Captain Hitsugaya, I figured I'd find you here. Naruto looked up to see a small-built man with a haircut that reminded him distinctly of his dearest Ino-chan, and of course of that bastard Tadara. Naturally he decided to comment on this. I don't like you. You look a lot like one of my wives. The blonde man gave Naruto the appropriate WTF look before he was questioned by Hitsugaya. Izuru? Are you the one responsible for this? Izuru just turned and walked out the door. Toshiro glanced at Naruto, who shrugged. Oh, I'll be fine with the dead guys. Toshiro grimaced, hating to leave the invader alone anywhere, but not having much of a choice. He gestured to Ranjiku to follow and took off after Izuru Kira, the vice captain to Ichimaru-jin. Just before they cleared the door they heard the Ryoka's voice one last time, though it was obvious he was speaking to himself. That babe had a really nice set. Toshiro blushed slightly, having thought the same several times himself. Ranjiku just grinned, accepting the lewd comment as a compliment. After giving the corpses another once-over, Naruto left to head deeper into the complex. He was well aware there was someone behind him and hiding, he just didn't register them as a threat. It was that short cute girl again. About 5 minutes later, Naruto found himself in what was obviously some kind of living quarters for the guys upstairs. Once again sensing someone behind him, he paused to assess the situation. There were actually two behind him. The girl and that Jin guy who reeked of danger. He did the prudent thing and hid. He watched as the girl was talked to by Jin, then another guy turning up, one who apparently had been thought to be dead. He watched the girl approach this Captain Aizen when he just sensed something. In his life as a ninja, he had developed the several extra senses. Ninja used them to keep themselves alive. One for danger, one for ambushes and traps, one for just plain trouble, one for angry women, and the ultimate version of one for an angry wife. He had also developed a sense that let him know when someone else was about to be attacked. His palms tingling, he moved. Aizen blinked in surprise as his sneak attack on Momo was intercepted by someone else. The young impressionable girl was knocked to the floor as the blade meant for her chest pierced the flesh of another. Momo gaped. No matter how much her heart wanted to deny it, the attack that was currently piercing the chest of the blonde Ryoka had been for her. She opened her mouth to ask a horrified question when a strong voice interrupted her thoughts. Run, she looked up at the blonde Ryoka, his bottomless deep blue eyes boring into her own. Run. And with that he struck out at Aizen who dodged, removing his blade from the man's chest. Momo stood to flee and had made it to the door when pain erupted from her stomach. Looking down, she easily spotted the blood-covered blade poking through her body. Looking back over his shoulder, Jin gave her a cheery wave before releasing his Shikai, making his extendable blade return to its original form. Naruto drew his blades and blocked an attack from Aizen. He pressed his blades hard against Aizen's who let out a slight grunt of strain, leaning in close he smirked. You're a clever one, 4 eyes. Plans within plans, eh? I knew someone like you once, and guess what he learned just as his plan was about to come to fruition. Aizen grinned, enjoying the fact that he was actually being pressed by the strange Ryoka. What did he learn? Aizen's grin was cut off as Naruto head-butted him, staggering back his hand went to his bleeding nose incredulously. Everything dies. The Ryoka bellowed like an angry lion before attacking with a terrifying ferocity. Aizen was temporarily on his back foot, unable to keep up with such an unpredictable fighting style, coupled with monster strength and ferocity. Releasing more of his own carefully hidden reserves, Aizen found it much easier to cope with the Ryoka's attacks, until the Ryoka upped his own level in an identical move. Aizen couldn't help the grin that came onto his face. A brief lull in combat had come upon them, both standing only a few feet from each other. I must say I would love to continue this battle. I haven't seen my own blood in many years. But unfortunately, I have somewhere to be and don't want to run late, so if you'll excuse me. He lowered his blade just as Naruto launched himself at Aizen again. Naruto grunted as Aizen once again blocked his attack, but the grunt wasn't from the block. It was from Jin's blade that stabbed straight through his side and out the other. Momo! Came a horrified shout. Naruto glanced over to see the white-haired kid cradling the girl. Using his best command voice, Naruto ordered. Kid, get the girl out of here. Instantly responding to the authority in the voice and tone he acted, scooping up Momo and retreating. A roar of pain behind him made him turn. Jin had turned his blade and ripped it out of the Ryoka's front, cutting him in half. His left-hand blade deflected another strike as the other went in for an attack on Aizen. Aizen, tired of the delay, moved with his true speed and strength. He batted aside the clumsy attack and abruptly beheaded the Ryoka. Itsugaya stared in horror at the dismembered head that lay at his feet. He turned to flee, cradling Momo to his chest. He hadn't made it far when the two traitors caught up. Thankfully Anohanaretsu's arrival forestalled any attack on the captain and his injured friend. Aizen smirked as he held up Naruto's head, getting horrified gasps from several throats. He didn't notice Yamamoto, Yukitake or Kairaku hiding small smiles. His smirk widened at Uruchi's horrified and broken gaze. He opened his mouth to taunt them when he heard what sounded like hundreds of birds chirping behind him. He turned to investigate when a pained cry drew his attention abruptly. He spun and his eyes rested upon Tosen, who was looking down with his sightless eyes in a vain attempt to see the hand covered with lightning that had been driven through his back and out his chest. A familiar head poked over the already dying captain's shoulder. Miss me? Aizen lost his calm and collected demeanor, openly glaring at the killer of his partner in crime. Naruto pulled his arm out of cannon with a sickening slurp, allowing the captain to fall to the ground, calling out Aizen's name. Before anyone could move, as they were either too shocked, too wounded or just didn't want to help the traitor, Naruto drew his blade and plunged it through the back of Tosen's head. He stood just as Jin's blade extended, cutting him neatly in half. Naruto's torso flew momentarily from his body before a blood-red energy leapt from his torso to his legs and drew them back together with a wet splat. The wound was gone in an instant, leaving Naruto utterly unharmed. That deserves a lol, Naruto just chuckled. Aizen glared hatefully at Naruto before summoning the Nejikin from the Mino's Grand. I don't know what you are, but you will pay for this. Despite being in the supposedly impenetrable negation, something sliced into his cheek. He spotted the slowly falling weapon. An oddly shaped throwing knife. Somehow it had been thrown through the negation. He turned to the only possibly culprit, Naruto. "I've marked you, boy," was all he said before he turned his back and started to walk towards Orochi. As he was lifted towards the sky, Aizen held a hand to his cut cheek, swearing to make Naruto pay for his impudence. Yukite called out to him. "You've joined with aminos, why would you want to do that?" "I need to keep reaching for the top," Aizen proclaimed as he removed his glasses and flattened out his hair, making it spike and drastically changing his look. "Have you become that corrupt, have you?" barked the normally placid captain, his deep gravely voice giving the words extra menace. "You're blinded by your self-righteousness. From the beginning, no one has ever stood at the top. Neither you, nor me, nor the gods. But soon that unobtainable vacancy at the top will be filled. From now on, only I will stand at the top. Goodbye Shinigami." Though the words weren't directed at him, he could still hear Naruto's smug voice from below. "So he wants to be a god. PFFT, fought them, killed them before." Aizen suppressed a growl and decided on one more gloating comment. "Goodbye, Ryoka boy." Directing his gaze at Ichigo, "I must admit, for a human, you were most entertaining." But that he disappeared with the rest of the hollows and Jin, leaving Tosen's body to rot. Unohana arrived to heal the wounded and found an amusing scene. Having been informed that the Ryoka were no longer considered enemies, she had decided to let her fascination for the blonde man to affect her. Having heard he was decapitated and seeing the evidence lying several feet from her, it was needless to say shocking to see him alive and well and being fussed over by Orochi. While half listening to a report from one of her division's members, she listened in on the blonde's conversation. "Orochi, stop it, I'm fine." Naruto whined, making Orochi huff in anger. "I was terrified out of my mind. Why didn't you tell me you could survive decapitation?" she half screamed. Naruto just shrugged. "It's not like it's ever come up. Besides, I wasn't worried, it's happened before. I was fine, just knocked out for a while. That's why I wasn't here sooner." Orochi just grumbled before hugging him fiercely and beginning to cry. At that point, Unohana decided whatever was going to be said between the two would be private. Naruto rocked slowly back and forth cradling Orochi as she got over the shock of having thought him dead. He continued to hold her until the battlefield had been cleared of wounded and, well, everybody else. Having found that Orochi had fallen asleep, he lay down as gently as possibly, allowing his love to lie gently upon his chest, and drifted off into sleep. The following morning, Naruto let off an evil cackle, disturbing many of the Shinigami around him, who were already fairly disturbed by what he was doing. You see, Naruto had managed to steal back from the 12th division his head, which had been taken for experimentation. He had managed to get away by feeling up the vice captain of said division, shocking her enough to let him escape. He had subsequently, while not a single bit squeamish, burnt all the flesh off his head, inside and out, cleaned it, and now had it resting on his hand while pretending to talk through it. He was thoroughly enjoying the creeped out looks he was getting when something smashed down hard on his head, making him yelp and sending his skull flying. He glared at the offender. Yamamoto merely stared back, evenly watching while Naruto retrieved the skull and offered it to him. To the shock of all those watching, Yamamoto merely took the skull calmly and nodded to Naruto before continuing on his walk. Unbeknownst to the rest of the Shinigami, Yamamoto was aware of one of the more peculiar traits of walkers. They had a habit of finding their own heads after being decapitated and giving them as gifts to people they respected. Yamamoto already had 2 in his collection. This would make a 3rd. He had already explained what Naruto was to the rest of his forces. Needless to say, Unohana had been greatly put out that the other 2 walkers the oldest captains had met, who she had known, had never revealed their uniqueness to her. She had known they were fairly strange, possibly insane given some of their antics, but she hadn't suspected them of being any different from other Shinigami. The first, named Logan, had disappeared shortly after Yamamoto established the academy. Marcus had disappeared about 400 years ago, with only the cryptic message "time to move on" his only explanation. The reactions varied. Byakuya had reluctantly admitted that even had he known about Naruto's abilities, he probably would have fallen to him. Kenpachi just wanted to fight him. Kurisuchi had wanted him for experimentation, having been enraged at losing the skull. The other captains had been shocked. Said knowledge had spread to the lieutenants and subsequently within a matter of hours the entire Soul Society knew. Though as with such things the facts were twisted. The 11th division heard Naruto was some kind god of war, while the 3rd heard he was a demon. The 5th believed he was an immortal Shinigami who had been in hiding for millennia, and the 7th thought he was some kind of monster. Naruto found the range of reactions endlessly amusing, the looks ranging from awed to wary to a kind of respectful wonder and downright fear were a source of great amusement. Naruto had learned they would be in Soul Society for little over a week, and as such, he had time to kill. He smirked. It was time to have some fun. Life was awesome. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, Like the video now and share the story with your friends. Bye bye.